Oh, you know what I love?
Sports.
Love sports.
Sports. When
It comes to Texas A&M.
Where are you getting this information?
Let me tell you.
Welcome to TexAgs.
TexAgs Live.
I feel like I should be listening to the theme song from the Jeffersons. You know, we're moving on up.
We will develop men, we will graduate players, and we will win championships on the field.
The best way for us to win is to do it together.
He is a guy that has gotten better and better and better. He's just got that dog in him.
This one's special. The 12th man this past week was unbelievable.
And this is a real program. It's not fake. This is a real place. And if you want to be really good at football, this is a really good place to be.
You know, if I'm betting on anybody, it's the Aggies.
We're already up to no good on a Monday morning inside the Rollo Insurance Studios. You're listening to TexAgs Live, presented by David Gardner's Jewelers. Richard Zane, Olin Buchanan, and the last hour we had building up the show always provides some good laughs. This morning, no different. I believe right before we came on air, you told me that I am way classier than Ryan Brauninger.
Well, and me. You know, we're a couple of East Texas rednecks, right?
Sure.
And he's even Southeast Texas, so that makes him even redder than me. And you know, you're this guy from the suburbs of Dallas, the money area.
So compared to you two, I'm all buttoned up, prim and proper.
Except for today.
Well, it's cold outside.
Yeah.
I try to be as warm as possible.
You know, Jewish guy from the suburbs of Dallas, probably real successful family. I know your family's very successful, and then you hanging around with us.
Yeah, because it's fun.
Yeah,
it's a blast.
Doesn't make a lot of sense, but okay.
Okay.
Yeah, well, you probably go over really big down in Longview and White Oak and Gladewater.
I've been to Lufkin.
Lufkin?
Lufkin, got some real good friends from Lufkin, Texas.
Lufkin, man. Good football players come out of Lufkin. Lufkin's been very good to Texas A&M.
I was in school with one of them, the same age as me, Eric McCoy.
Eric McCoy.
Same major, saw him all the time in Bolton Hall.
So you and
we were
Eric
on
McCoy
campus.
are kind of like boys with a Z.
No, I don't think so.
No.
No. I don't know if Eric McCoy could pick me out of a lineup.
Oh, okay.
But we definitely had some classes together back in the day. Communication major at A&M and stuff like
example
that.
of how good Lufkin has been.
He was as nice of a human being as good of a player he was. And he's had a hell of a career in the NFL.
I can go down. Yes, outstanding. You know, Reggie McNeil, Lufkin guy, Jaworski Lane, Lufkin guy.
One of my favorite players as a kid.
Matt McCall way back in the day, big old offensive tackle, about 6'9". It seemed like he was a Lufkin guy.
Well, I guess this is Lufkin Panthers Radio. Go Pack. With Olin Buchanan
what is that,
and
Lufkin,
Richard
the
Zane.
pack? Panthers do not travel in packs. Why do they call themselves the Packs if they're the Panthers?
I don't know. I was a Flower Mound Jaguar, and we were bad at everything.
You're the Jaguars?
So we didn't go to football games.
They got Jaguars up in Flower Mound. I know it's a big problem up there.
On Peters Colony Road, they got Jaguars. That's about it. Because that's where the high school's located.
Okay.
So, Olin.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and talk about some basketball.
There
was some hoops this weekend. We'll get into some other topics. Obviously, today's Inauguration Day up in Washington. It's MLK Day as well. So if you're spending your holiday with us, we appreciate you. And then it's also National Championship Day in Atlanta. We'll get to all those topics. We'll talk about some NFL as well, much to my dismay. But biggest news story of the weekend, as far as this desk is concerned, is Buzz Williams and company are back on track. They picked up a 68-57 victory over the LSU Tigers on Saturday night at Reed Arena. Wade Taylor made his return, scored 12 points, 3 of 13 from the field, 5 of 6 at the line. A&M's free throw woes are ongoing. We learned that. And I didn't watch the game on Saturday night, but when I was watching it as a heartbroken Lions fan on Sunday morning, it was a very, very sloppy game, OB, but one that you had to win and one that makes you feel better for actually winning.
Well, first of all, Wade, I'm not surprised if he's just a little bit rusty. I mean, he's sat down for 3 games, but he showed in what 24 minutes of play, just what he means to that team. I think you said 5 of 6 at the free throw line.
Yes.
The rest of the team was something like 4 of 11 or 4 of 15. You know, it just underscored how valuable he is. And yeah, they're going to A&M rarely has a game where it's just aesthetically pleasing. That's not who they are. They again, they're the workmanlike team, and they worked over LSU, especially in the second half. They got on a 10-0 run. And it wasn't even a beautiful 10-0 run because it took 5 minutes, but they 10-0 run took control of that game. And yeah, big win. Every win in the SEC is a big win.
And they're all hard to come by, and you're going to have a couple of road tests again later this week. You got to go to Oxford to face Ole Miss, an Ole Miss team that just lost their first conference game, a rivalry game in Starkville in overtime. And then on Saturday night, or Saturday afternoon, I should say, you got to go to Austin to play at the Moody Center against the Texas Longhorns.
Never been to the Moody Center.
I haven't either, and I would have liked to go, but we're sending the more competent basketball crew to that game. But I've heard it's a great venue. But that's a team that's struggling. They're 2-3 to begin SEC play. They might be 1-4. But Rodney Terry's job might be on the line, so you might be getting a desperate Longhorn team. There's always a ton of tests. Each and every single game is going to be a tough test that you got to study for and be ready for.
We said it before. The bad teams in the SEC are good. So especially on the road. So no rest for the weary.
Let's talk about Wade Taylor, who might have been a little bit weary, trying to get himself back into game fitness. He missed 3 games. He was hobbled by the injury when the Aggies beat Texas to open SEC play. Olin, do you have any concerns about Wade Taylor? 3 of 13 from the field, not great, but it leads me to believe the comments that were made post-game by both Buzz Williams and Wade that the injury is no longer lingering. They let him rest until he was 100%. Is it just a fitness thing? Could that explain some of the struggles in his return?
Yeah, it could be. Now, look, it's not uncommon for Wade to miss a lot of shots. But what Wade does is he'll make big shots for you, like a three-pointer he hit when they needed one. And Wade draws fouls. And, he could have scored more. We just saw a highlight where he is in position for a layup, and he dishes it off for a teammate to score. So if he goes 4 of 11, you hardly even react. But he goes 3 of 10, or something like that.
Oh, no. The sky's falling.
No, I mean, Wade could go 3 of 11 or 3 of 10 and score 15 points.
I have to be very careful because if I keep going down the negative trail, Billy Liucci is going to call in and call me negatane or something because I'm being too negative about an 11-point SEC win. But there's a ton of positives to take from Wade Taylor because he attracts so much attention to himself that he opens it up for Zurich Phelps, who no longer has to run the offense alone with Manny Obaski as the secondary point guard. And you see a guy like C.J. Wilcher who made his first true SEC contribution, 9 points on 3 triples in that game.
That's what he's supposed to do, right? And if I could if you get 9 points and 3 threes out of him every game, you'd take that right now, The guy that didn't have a great game, that's been playing really well, was Pharrell Payne. Okay, you're not going to do it every game. I just thought that, again, you can say that, LSU's not that good. Well, LSU has some good wins. So they're not that bad either. And they're a heck of a lot better than they were last year when they beat A&M at Reed Arena. So you take any win you can get and you feel good about it. And the fact that Wade Taylor is back in the lineup is all I need to feel good about the Aggies' chances moving forward. I've said it last week. You give me a healthy Wade Taylor, A&M is as good as anybody in the SEC.
You mentioned LSU's got some good wins. They beat Arkansas in their most recent SEC game before they came
from behind to do that.
And Arkansas is a story in itself. 0-5 to start SEC play.
They've had some good wins in non-conference play.
Sticking with the Tigers, they beat a team that it's a common opponent between A&M and LSU, and that's UCF. They needed triple overtime to do it, but they won the game. That was.
And then UCF lose by 1 point to Houston this last weekend.
I didn't see that.
I think it was like 68-67, I think.
There are a lot of good college basketball
UCF's
games
not
this
bad.
weekend. No, they are not. And then LSU also beat Kansas State on the road in Manhattan.
Yeah,
and Kansas State and Big 12 always produces pretty solid basketball teams.
So that's why, again, no need to apologize for an 11-point victory over LSU.
No, don't ever apologize. And I think Luke Evangelist brought the cliche to his 5 thoughts.
Oh, I'm sure he did.
He is the king of cliches. He brought it to his 5 thoughts article after the LSU victory, and they don't ask how, Olin. They only ask how many. Right? And A&M's now got 3 conference victories, and that's a good place to be 5 games in.
And so very close to 4.
Mm-hmm.
And if they had Wade, I think they would have had 4. Now they have Wade. So bringing it back to Wade Taylor.
Now you got to hope that Wade Taylor and company can take the positives gleaned from Saturday's victory and take them with them to Oxford
and Austin.
Big week ahead for Texas A&M basketball. Buzz Williams will be joining this radio show later today. Go ahead and give you a quick rundown of what to expect on this edition of TexAgs Live. Olin Buchanan is here for the entire 8 o'clock hour. This is the Go Hour presented by who, OB?
The Go Hour is presented by CC Creations.
Yes, and this is Coffee Talk presented by who? This particular segment, right?
Yeah. Is it?
Presented by TexAgs Coffee. It's what my rundown says.
Well, that's why it's
BTHO Morning.
Talk.
Yeah. BTHO Morning by going to texags.com/coffee.
I thought you were trying to trick me. Coffee Talk.
I would never try to trick you, Olin Buchanan.
What's this studio?
This is the Rollo Insurance Studio.
Okay. And who brings it? Who? You already said David Gardner, didn't you?
Yes, David Gardner's Jeweler presents TexAgs Live.
And sometimes we have a certain zone.
Yes, over there, that's the cool zone, but College Station as a whole is the cold zone.
Oh, today it really is.
Today and tomorrow.
Yeah. It's a cool zone, the holistic planning cool zoning.
Nick, can we get a shot of the cool zone? Yeah, that's the cool zone.
Holistic planning, cool zone. Holistic planning will help you with your investments, your taxes, and your estate planning.
Nunez got you trained so well. It's incredible.
Like a seal?
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
That's my seal of approval.
Or is that a seal bark or are you a carnival barker?
No, that's my seal of approval.
Oh, God.
So, and you can invest in pro sports with holistic planning. You go to like investinprosports.com or something like that.
I'll trust you.
Okay.
Do you remember your little anaconda thing that happened here a couple weeks ago?
I remember someone asking me about if I'd want to be in the movie of Anaconda, and I said I'd like to be the title. I'd like to play the title role.
I thought so. Do you remember Liucci and Browninger introed that segment by having you stand over there, all off on your own,
right?
And they said you look like a weatherman, and I thought that it would have been a perfect bit to have you do a weather report today, given the quote unquote extreme cold here in Bryan College Station. But
cold, low pressure, cold air coming in from Canada, from the north, and look for temperatures to drop below.
I was going to have you stand up there with a map and a 5-day forecast and do the whole thing, but Nick didn't give it a glowing reaction, so I thought better of it. Should we go ahead and say hello to Nick Savage?
Hey, Nick.
Behind the glass. Good morning, Nick.
Way to make me sound like
whether he likes
fun
it or not.
Nuno.
No, here's the deal, Nick. I sometimes have ideas that I think are funny and are only funny to me. And because you did not give me a great reaction to that idea, I thought better of it, and I think this show is better because of it. So
I just thought
you're the early candidate for MVP of the show. Let's just say that.
Well, thank you. I was just thinking it was going to be what OB makes of it. And, is OB going to be jolly? Is he going to be angry? You never know. So
I'm in a good mood today.
I know, OB. I know you are, but we all are, I guess. But yeah, good morning to y'all.
Good morning, Nick Savage. Any thoughts on the hoops game from Saturday night and maybe your Houston Texans going down on Saturday afternoon?
Well, I know you kind of agreed with me that some of those penalties called in that ball game were a little wild, but basketball thought, I'll let y'all get on to the football game here in a second, but basketball thought, like y'all said, it's a good win. Free throws are slightly concerning at this point. A long way to go, so I'm sure they'll clean it up. But what OB's, I can tell. What do you think about those 2 penalties thrown on the Texans for hitting Mahomes?
I'm not a Texans fan, right? I'm not against them. And I actually kind of like the Chiefs. Why? Because Patrick Mahomes is an East Texas guy. You know, we used to play White House when I was at White Oak. And I have to say, man, they got hosed. They got hosed. There was some calls that went against the Texans. I'm like, okay, man, if I was a Houston fan, I'd be really upset about that. I think whoever that one official is, that referee, they shouldn't let him officiate Kansas City games.
I don't know what the actual record is or the name of the referee.
Yeah, they are 7-0.
Unbeaten.
Well, they're unbeaten on a lot of things, but there just seems to be some real weirdness in that game. There was the one where I thought Mahomes was running and he's juking around, and then at the last minute, he it wasn't even a slide. He just drops down, and two guys. No, neither one really hit him hard. It's 15-yard penalty. Like, what are you doing?
They hit each other more so than they hit him. And then it was it might have been the very next play. He's running around, scrambling again, and he's about this far from stepping out of bounds. He hasn't stepped out of bounds yet, and he's shoved out because he's still in the field of play. And he flopped like he was LeBron James or a soccer player. If they had thrown a flag on that play, I would have lost my mind.
If I was like a 15-year veteran and this is my last year, it's been announced I'm retiring, and if I'm losing the game, my career's over, and that official called that, I might have just taken a 10-yard run and start and blow him up and say, all right, kick me out of the game. You're cheating us anyway.
Mm-hmm. So Kansas City's moving on.
That's my advice to older players. If you don't like a call, just, knock down the official.
Kansas City's moving on to the AFC Championship game. They'll face the Buffalo Bills next weekend. They beat the Texans 23-14. And here's my thoughts on that game as a whole. I thought Kansas City is not an obvious better team than the Houston Texans right now, because I think C.J. Stroud's a fantastic quarterback. I like what DeMeco Ryans and them are building in Houston. But for right now, Kansas City's a better team. But for 3 quarters, Houston had earned a shot at pulling off the upset. And that shot was almost completely taken away from them by a handful of flags.
When I was watching, I just thought...
And Houston fans, you have every right to be bitter.
I thought the Texans were the better team for the most. What do you think? What do you think, Reed Neal?
We're going to go ahead
Reed, whichever it is.
Introduce Reed Neal making his TexAgs live debut over in the Angry Elephant News and Social Center. Aggies gather at the Angry Elephant. Reed, good morning, sir.
Good morning. How are y'all doing?
Good. Excellent.
That's great.
You got, try to curb your enthusiasm a little bit there.
Well,
how are you doing? Are you okay?
I'm doing good.
Are you nervous?
No, I mean, a little bit. It was a cold walk over here, so I'm still warming up.
Look, listen, you don't need to be nervous. When people heard my voice coming through the radio, they turned it off, so they're already not listening to us.
I don't know if that's good or bad.
Good morning. Well,
I'm sure everybody in Bernie, Texas is tuning in.
Yeah, so Reed, go ahead and introduce yourself to the TexAgs audience. A little bit about yourself, who you are, where you're from.
So my name's Reed Neal. I'm from Bernie, Texas. I went to Bernie High School. Go Greyhounds. I am a freshman now at A&M. Second generation. Both my parents went here, so kind of only had one option if they weren't going to pay for it. So.
Well, Reed,
so you weren't going to go to A&M unless they paid for it?
No. I'm just saying they weren't going to pay for anything unless I went to A&M.
I'm just messing with you.
Well, we're happy to have you, Reed. He's very excited. He was telling me this morning he was born in 2006, which sounds wild to me.
Well, yeah, I'm so close to death.
Not that I'm super old, but like at 28, I feel...
Yeah, I think he's perfect for that. I mean, just with his name, he is obviously born for that job, Yeah. Is there anything to read?
Well, depends on what y'all want to hear on the Kansas Texans game. Richard, I like what you were saying. Overall, the Kansas City Chiefs did look better. C.J. Stroud was sacked 8 times, and he was 19 for 28 with 245 yards. But they did stick in the game, and I definitely think they had a way better shot if they didn't have those calls at the end. Whether they would have ended up winning that game without those questionable calls is definitely up for grabs. But Patrick Mahomes, 16 for 25, receptions and 177 yards with 1 touchdown. Travis Kelce with 7 receptions, 117 yards with 1 touchdown, which was a season high.
I just wish that they could get through a game where Kelce doesn't catch. Just keep him from catching the ball. Not that I care about it. Just I don't have to look at Taylor Swift.
He had a career high. It was 117 receiving yards in that game and the only receiving touchdown for the for the Chiefs. And it was a hell of a play because it was one of those plays where Mahomes was getting chased around. He's scrambling, and right before he gets tackled, it's like
Touchdown,
he's diving, and he throws it. It's like the Texans in the scramble drill had forgotten to cover the biggest guy on the field. That was pretty frustrating.
And speaking of
frustrating, and I'm sure heartbreaking for those of you who are Texans fans out there.
Speaking of not covering people in frustration and heartbreak.
Yeah, I think we're going to go ahead and get into that on the other side of our first break here on TexAgs Live. You're listening to TexAgs Live on the Zone. We'll catch you on the next side of this break.
What's up, TexAgs? This commercial break is brought to you by my good friends over at Aggieland Chevrolet, the official automotive sponsor of TexAgs.com and me, Billy Liucci. Greg Gunn is the proud owner of Aggieland Chevrolet and invites you to visit the dealership to experience true Aggie hospitality. From their friendly staff to the experienced service team, Aggieland Chevrolet is TexAgs approved. Check out the dealership off of Highway 6 in Bryan or go to AggielandChevrolet.com and tell them Billy Liucci sent you by.
Where does Freebird rank among the greatest Leonard Skinner songs?
A lot of people say number one.
Okay.
I would not.
And why is that?
It's a good song. It's kind of long. I personally like Three Steps.
Okay.
Three Steps would be my favorite one. And of course, Sweet Home Alabama, high up there. And I like the Ballad of Curtis Lowe.
Looking up Leonard Skinner songs now. Do you think the interns that are in here with us,
they probably don't know who Leonard or Skinner is.
Leonard Skinner is? Reed, do you know who Leonard Skinner is?
I know what Freebird is, but if you asked me who Leonard Skinner was, I wouldn't be able to tell you.
That the band that sang Freebird.
Well, yeah. Now I know it.
I call this. We have this one girl in here, and I call her Sugarland because she's Sugarland because I can't remember her name because we have too many girls with the same name here, and she's just shaking her head no, like she doesn't know who Leonard Skinner is or was, or I guess they're still around in some form.
It wasn't too long ago that whatever form they are now.
I was in high school when they had the plane crash. I was in high school when Ronnie Van Zant and some of the others passed away.
What year was that?
That would have been around 77, 78.
Wow. You are old.
I was a sophomore. Crowley High School, go Eagles.
You are old.
Yes, I'm old. I am.
Same old Olin.
But you know what? I get the really good parking spaces at HEB now.
They have senior citizens parking spaces. This is TexAgs Live, presented by David Gardner's Jewelers. The same old Olin Buchanan inside the Rollo Insurance Studio with me, Richard Zane, and I was heartbroken, dismayed to see a performance from the same old Lions.
No,
Saturday
they're
night
not the
in
same
Detroit.
old Lions.
No, I know they're not. I know they're not because what Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes and the Ford family has done to take what was a pitiful franchise and turn them into a contender over the last few years proves that they're not the same old Lions. But for one night, it certainly felt like it, and it was absolutely gut-wrenching.
Yeah, I couldn't watch the game because I was covering the basketball game, but I was trying to keep up as best I could, in between breaks. Yeah, I was disappointed. Especially not only did the team I wanted to win at all, the Lions, not only did they not win, but they lost to a team that I don't like.
And it sets up a game next week that you really don't like.
I can tell you right now, I don't know who's going to win from the AFC, but that's the team I'm rooting for in the Super Bowl because I can't root for the Eagles or the Commander Skins.
Commanders, or as Bronny called them last week, the commies.
Yeah, I can't root for them.
You can't. Olin Buchanan, known hater of commies. Anyways, the commies beat the Lions 45-31, and Detroit's best season ever ends without a playoff victory.
Yeah.
That was just Olin. It was brutal. Like, I literally sat in the dark for about 45 minutes, not looking at my phone or saying, I couldn't believe it.
Let me tell you.
I still can't believe it.
The one thing that I think is really good is when you become a real adult. And real adults is when you got a mortgage and you got kids, and all of a sudden, you still get upset that your team doesn't win, but you're upset for like 5 minutes because you got bigger things to worry about.
Well, I can't wait then because I'm still upset.
Well, I'm sure Jenna's can't wait either.
36 hours. Honestly, I can't think of a more hurtful, heartbreaking loss ever. Even as a Lions fan, and I know last year they were up 24-7 at halftime with the chance to go to the Super Bowl, but even that one didn't hurt as much as Saturday night.
Because it was still new and you were still playing with house money. And
you're kind of feeling like, we're just happy to be here. I even remember telling Jenna at halftime of that game, I looked at her, I was like, this is going to hurt so bad. I'm talking about the NFC Championship game last year because they're the Lions. They could have a 20-point lead with 10 seconds left in the fourth quarter, and I'm not going to believe it until it's over, kind of thing.
Right. Yeah.
So this one is just so unexpected. Jared Goff, 3 interceptions, a fumble. He lost a fumble in the first quarter when they were driving to potentially take a 2-score lead. You have a must-have drive, and you throw a pass with a wide receiver. It's just everything that
there were some things to learn from.
Yep. And we'll talk a lot more about the Lions a little bit later on in the show.
You know,
when
I
Billy
think
comes in. And
I think we're all
talk about
Lions
Dan
fans because of Dan Campbell.
And it hurts so much because I know, like, if I feel this bad, I can't imagine how bad he and the coaching staff and all the players feel because, man, they pour so much into it, and it's so cool to see what they've done for that community, and it's just so heartbreaking for all of them and for really all the fans. But, oh well, it's sports.
Yeah.
As Olin says, I'll get over it when I have some real things to worry about.
I just hope Aaron Glenn ends up being the Dallas Cowboys next coach. I know he won't, but
Do you have any? Who do you, if you had to bet money right now, who do you think they would hire?
Kellen Moore.
You think they'll get Kellen Moore?
Yeah, Kellen Moore looks like some guy who's still in the 8th grade, and that's going to be a leader of men.
The guy who they unceremoniously ran off a few years ago?
Yes.
They're going to bring him back to be the head man?
Yes. Is that not the most Jerry Jones thing ever?
Yes.
Yeah.
It is. All right, we'll talk some more football on the other side. We've got a national championship to talk about. Ohio State and Notre Dame tonight in Atlanta. This is TexAgs Live, presented by David Gardner's Jewelers. Don't go anywhere. We are here for a good time on TexAgs Live, presented by David Gardner's Jewelers. Olin Buchanan, Richard Zane inside the Rollo Insurance Studio, and this is the back half of the Go Hour, presented by The Warehouse at CC Creations. And now we're going to go to the Angry Elephant News and Social Center with Reed Neal to get a check of our text line. Reed?
How's it going, guys? Yeah, so our text line, lots of talk about how disappointing the lineup for tonight's championship game is. More specifically about just how usually you have those top 4 teams playing, and I think a lot of people are kind of butthurt that, you know, those lower ranked teams in the top 12 are getting their chance. I kind of prefer it, but I don't know. How do y'all feel about it?
Well, national championship game tonight, I believe 7:30, maybe 6:30 Central Time kickoff on ESPN. It's 13-2 Ohio State versus 14-1 Notre Dame. And if you are the college football playoff, I think you probably got your dream matchup as far as brands and attention go. But for those of us who don't like Ohio State or don't like Notre Dame or don't like both.
Yeah. I typically don't like both, but in my mind, the lesser of two evils is Ohio State. So I'm going to be rooting for Ohio State, much to the chagrin of my in-laws.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they think that, and I wonder if anybody else ever runs through this. So my wife thinks that I'm supposed to root for Notre Dame because her sister went to Notre Dame. I'm like, you know, I told her yesterday, we were talking about this, and I said, I've hated Notre Dame a lot longer than I've loved you. And so you're going to have to understand that I will not root for Notre Dame ever. Well, if they were playing Texas or in a certain situation, maybe, but rarely, if ever, could I root for Notre Dame. So, and I think they're going to lose tonight. I think that you look at Ohio State. Why would anybody complain about Ohio State? Didn't they beat Tennessee? And then what was it, Oregon?
They beat Tennessee, Oregon, and then beat Texas in the semifinal.
I mean, you talk about having a much difficult road to get to the championship game than Notre Dame. And quite frankly, I think Indiana, who Notre Dame beat first, I think they were somewhat of an imposter.
Sure.
You know, but you know they had a great season, but they played a really weak schedule. I think Kirby Smart made about 2 or 3 really dumb coaching moves to help.
And their quarterback got hurt.
And they're playing with that was part of the dumb moves that Kirby Smart did. I got a true freshman quarterback. I'm only down 6-3. Let's just get into the half and talk about what we got to do. Instead, he's trying to, as his true freshman, trying to lead them to a score with less than a minute to go, and instead he gets a sack and a fumble, and they score, and they have all the momentum. So really, 2 plays was the difference between Georgia and Notre Dame. It was that turnover just for the half, and then returning the opening kickoff of the second half, and then they played Penn State, which feels like to me Drew Aller gave Notre Dame the game. So I just feel like Ohio State's a much better team, and I would not be surprised. In fact, I expect Notre Dame to win. Ohio State to win by double digits. What say you, Richard Zane?
Well, I hope that's wrong. I hope Ohio State never scores another point in another football game they play from now until the end of time. But that's because I grew up a Michigan fan. Although I grew up a Michigan fan, which means I certainly don't want Notre Dame to score any points either. Look, Ohio State in their 3 playoff games has looked like the best team in the country. They're averaging 37 points per game. They blew out Tennessee. That wasn't even a contest. Remember, those first weekend of games were uninspiring and, quite frankly, unwatchable to the casual fan, or at least the fan that doesn't have a dog in the fight. And then they blew out Oregon in Rose Bowl. And then it was a defensive battle against Texas. Will Howard didn't have his best game against the Longhorns, but that Ohio State defense, for as much credit as we give Howard and Jeremiah Smith and Travion Henderson and all those guys on the offensive side of the ball, Jack Sawyer and company are a damn good defensive unit, and I don't know if Riley Leonard is going to have very much success against the Buckeyes tonight. I think the Buckeyes are going to be the national champions, and I don't want to think about that now. I've got a few more hours to come to terms with the Ohio State Buckeyes being the national champions.
Okay. Reed, who's winning?
I'm kind of indifferent. I think Ohio State will win.
Okay.
And I'm not really rooting for either team because I do like Notre Dame just as a program. I really like Riley, 2,600 passing yards, 19 passing touchdowns, and 866 rushing yards. But I do like Ohio State just because they beat Texas. And
there's a good reason.
They made sure I wasn't seeing any orange in the national championship. And Caleb Downs, the Ohio State safety, 76 tackles, 6 pass deflections, 2 interceptions. So,
now I will say this: Ohio State has bought a really good team with Caleb Downs and some of the other guys they brought in, the running back Quinshawn Judkins, Will Howard. So they've done well in the transfer portal. That's today's football. Today's college football.
Both quarterbacks playing in tonight's national championship game were coached by A&M coaches last year?
Yes. Mike Elko coached Riley Leonard at Duke. Colin Klein coached Will Howard at Kansas State.
Speaking of Riley Leonard, Matthew Dawson helped put together some stats for today's game. Under pressure stats for Riley Leonard. It's very interesting. When he's kept clean, he's thrown 17 touchdowns and 6 interceptions. His PFF passing grade, 86.3, pretty solid. When he is pressured, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, the passing grade, 36.2. When he is blitzed, 11 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and 81% passing grade. So he says, Matthew Dawson, the savant in the back, says, moral of the story, if Ohio State is going to blitz, they better get some kind of pressure.
Yes. I think you can say that for any quarterback.
And Notre Dame's getting offensive line help back because Charles Jagishaw played in the semifinal game, and he's going to play at guard tonight. What do you think the key to tonight's game is?
I think Ohio State just can't do anything to help Notre Dame. I think Ohio State is a better football team. They're going to be able to look how Penn State abandoned the run too much or too soon. I think Ohio State will run on them, and then I think in play action they're going to have some big completions. I think the best player in college football is that wide receiver,
Jeremiah Smith.
And I think that Notre Dame will not be able to score very often.
Jeremiah Smith, true freshman. 1,227 receiving yards on 71 catches, 14 receiving touchdowns. It's a 17.3 yard per reception. And against Oregon and Tennessee, 13 catches, 290 yards, 4 touchdowns.
So the guy that I would think needs to have a big game is that other receiver, because you saw what Texas did. They bracket coverage Jeremiah Smith, and it was successful. So in that case, the other kid whose name I can't think of, kind of a unusual name.
Sure, I'll take your word for it. I'm not anyway, well versed in Ohio State wide receivers.
I would expect he's going to
jump Mbuka or something like that.
Yes, I would expect him to get a lot of single coverage. But quite frankly, the guy I think may have the really big game is the Travion Henderson.
Think Notre Dame has any chance tonight?
Well, you always have a chance.
Do you think the key to Notre Dame having a chance is slowing down the passing attack? Because we saw firsthand what they can do to stop a passing attack in the season opener. Granted, A&M didn't have the weapons at receiver that Ohio State does. And Connor Wigman played one of the worst games of his life.
Yeah, I'm not a big believer in Will Howard. I mean, I think he's okay. But with a really good running game, and it's funny because they struggled running early in the year. But they seem to have figured out a lot of problems. And I just think that they're a better football team. But if Ohio State does some things like Georgia did, and I don't think they will, to keep out, to help out your opponent, then obviously I think you always have a chance if you're a good football team.
Notre Dame has the second best passing defense in the country. You know who's number 1?
Ohio State.
Ohio State. 2 really, really good defenses going at it tonight.
Yeah, Notre Dame's pass defense is really good. I get that, but I still wonder how much of that is a byproduct of who you've played. Like I can remember one year A&M was ranked 3rd in the nation in pass defense. Well, it's because everybody just ran on them.
Mm-hmm.
But I think who's the great passing quarterback that Notre Dame has played? There's a kid from USC was having a big game against me. Just kept throwing it to the wrong guys. But who's the Navy guy, the Army guy? Who's the great passing? It sure wasn't Connor. I guess it was the guy from Northern Illinois.
Maybe USC.
Well, I just mentioned him.
I mean, they scored 35 points.
Yeah, but he threw pick sixes. So take care of the ball. Again, don't help. Drew Aller. Drew Aller has got to be the most overrated quarterback in America.
I think he's making the right decision to come back for another year. So, Ohio State, Notre Dame tonight, 6:30 p.m. Central Time on ESPN, the national championship game being played in Atlanta this year. We'll talk more about that game in the 9 o'clock hour. We'll talk to it with Tom Hart and then Jonathan Hutton of Outkick and, of course, Billy Liucci during the 10 o'clock hour. But as we go into this next break here on TexAgs Live, we'll get ready to close out the go hour on the other side, see what Olin's going to do to fight the cold as we close out the go hour on a Monday morning. Closing down the go hour on a Monday morning. Richard Zane, Olin Buchanan inside the Rollo Insurance Studio. You're listening to TexAgs Live, presented by David Gardner's Jewelers. And a reminder, the go hour presented by The Warehouse at CC Creations. OB, it's pretty chilly outside.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Are you prepared for a freeze tonight?
Yeah, I already got all the things on the covers on the faucets outside. We're already dripping the faucets. No to do that, but I'm gonna make a big pot of shrimp and andouille sausage gumbo tonight and sit there and watch the game.
So what time should I come over?
I didn't want to offend you. I know that being Jewish, that sometimes you guys don't like to eat like shrimp because
so I don't keep kosher.
Oh, you don't keep kosher. Yeah. So I can throw some bacon in it too.
Sure.
Come on over.
Come hang out with Olin Buchanan.
We'll have some.
Is it okay that I root for Notre Dame?
Oh, it's okay. I mean, you're going to be disappointed, but hey, look, today.
Do you think I'm
so happy today? Everything's good. Go ahead, root for Notre Dame. Root for Ohio State. Root for America. I'm rooting for America today. Good day for America.
How are you going to root for America as Nick Savage gives you a sitting ovation? He claps his hands.
It's a good day. It's a good day. You got MLK Day. You got the national championship game. You got the buffoon out of office. So it's a great day. It's a great day.
OB, I'm glad you're having a great day.
It's a great day.
Still licking the wounds from the Lions loss on Saturday.
I would think that
Maybe
would
I'll get over it.
Yeah.
OB, I appreciate you. Thanks so much for joining me this
My work
morning.
here is done.
Yeah, the rest of the show, we've got Tom Hart and Jonathan Hutton coming up in the 9 o'clock hour. We'll also have Around Aggieland with Kay Naegeli. And then during the 10 o'clock hour, we'll talk to Buzz Williams and then Billy Liucci, TexAgs co-owner and executive editor, later on in the show. Olin, thanks for joining me for the Go Hour. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to TexAgs Live, presented by David Gardner's Jewelers on The Zone. 9 o'clock hour on TexAgs Live, presented by David Gardner's Jewelers. Richard Zane inside the Rollo Insurance Studio. However you're accessing the program today, whether it be on the zone locally in Bryan College Station, on our YouTube page, so make sure to subscribe to the YouTube page if you haven't already, or on texags.com/live. I want to appreciate you and thank you for joining in. And now it's time to hop on out to the Boss Firearms Hotline. Boss Firearms, your local experts. They buy used guns, ammos, and accessory. Go to bossfirearms.com to start earning money like a boss today. And on that Boss Firearms hotline, we find SEC Network and ESPN play-by-play voice, Fun Tom Hart, the mayor of Lexington. Tom, good morning, sir.
Hi, Richard. How are you today?
You know, as a Lions fan, I've been better. As a Dodger fan, I'm always doing great because we are breaking baseball, apparently.
You may be the only person in this country that is a fan of the Lions and the Dodgers simultaneously, because those two programs, especially historically, are on opposite ends of the spectrum, are they not?
They very much do not mix as far as geographically and then championship success, anything like that. You're right. I'm one of the very few. I know I'm not the only one because I do have a father. So there's that. We might be the only two, though.
You might be the only two. There is one thing that you have in common. That would be star players retiring early. You've got Sandy Koufax with the Dodgers, and you've got Barry Sanders and Calvin Johnson piecing out with the Lions. And so there's the only comp I can think of.
Very, very true. Tom, let's go ahead and get into some SEC basketball chatter. Locally, at least, the big story of the week was Wade Taylor returned to Texas A&M's lineup on Saturday night as the Aggies took down LSU. Wade had missed the last 3 games. He had been hobbled before that with an undisclosed injury. He scores 12 points in the 11-point win. How important was it to get him back for Buzz Williams and company, and as they move forward, to get him back into game shape and game fitness?
Well, I think it was incredibly important. I mean, he is as valuable as anybody in the SEC. I thought in his absence, I thought Phelps played really well, and he understood the assignment, which was, we need you to get go out there and be a bucket. We're going to use you on a lot of possession. It's opened up now for you to be the guy to take some shots, and he's proven to be a high volume scorer. I'm thinking especially about the coming games for them. Starting midweek, I'll be in Oxford, freezing my tail off, but I'll be in Oxford for the A&M game Wednesday night. And what they do defensively, what Chris Beard does, it's very similar to what Buzz wants to do in terms of kind of packing the middle, trying to keep the ball on one side of the floor, daring you to try and skip past or reverse it where they lay in wait, and they do an amazing job with takeaways. But to that point, you really have to have threats on both sides of the floor to take advantage of it. And you need, in big games, Taylor and Phelps to be on the floor at the same time. And so I think that's really important going forward. And I hope his hip is good enough. I hope the movement isn't limited. And like you said, getting back in game shape, I mean, I hope he's able to get up and down the floor and can give quality minutes. He doesn't have to be, he's spoken about, well, I want to be 100% to be back on the floor. Listen, he's enough of a threat. He doesn't have to be 100%. I know he wants to be. I'm sure Buzz wants him to be, especially from an effort standpoint on both ends of the floor. But just having a threat against a defense like Ole Miss and how they play it is enough to try and stretch them out, to try and then find holes in what they want to do.
Wade Taylor coming back, obviously a huge storyline from Texas A&M's 68-57 win. But Tom, the other one is free throw shooting or lack thereof. A&M shot just 42.9% from the charity stripe in that win. So my question for you is, what would your free throw percentage be?
Oh, listen, there's no doubt. I'm a 70% plus free throw shooting guy. I don't know. Do you know what the NCAA average is? I mean, if you're over 70, you're doing okay. Now, there are elite teams and there are bad teams, and there are teams that kind of their free throw shooting comes and goes. This feels like a trend for A&M, especially in bigger games. They're sub 70% on the season. I think they're below 68%. And, you can survive that at times, but if you're going to play close games and low-scoring games, which they sometimes do, like against LSU, boy, you've got to have, the ability to knock down the free throws, and part of that is getting the right people to the line to shoot the free throws. I think that's an underrated part of all of this.
You use the word trend, Tom. Is there some serious concern this is going to no longer be a trend and just be who they are moving forward? And what does A&M need to do to prevent that from happening, I guess? And the obvious answer to that, I'm sure, is, well, make the free throws, make the freebies. But if it's not working, is it mental? Is it physical? What is it? What do you think it is?
Well, I would say this about any team in the SEC that's sub 70%. And by the way, it's not just what you do; it's what the opponents do, right? In any given game, LSU got 7 more points from the free throw line. They went 16 of 18 from the free throw line, while you're going 9 of 21. That's a real problem. Phelps going 0 for 2. That's a problem because you want the ball in his hands when you're trying to make things happen. But the reason it's an issue in this league is no league in college basketball, no major league, let me just put it that way, no power league, fouls more than the SEC. And it's a byproduct of a lot of different elements. It's a hyper-athletic league. It's a league of great effort. And look at the way A&M and Ole Miss play defense, just as one example in terms of the effort they put in on the defensive side of the floor. It has historically been, and once again this year, the league that leads the nation in block shot percentage. And part of that is these athletes going to the rim, challenging each other, and the ability to get up and stylistically, okay, we're going to choose to challenge shots at the rim versus just, be hands up Harry and make them shoot over the top of us. 18 fouls per game in the SEC last year. That is 2 more than the ACC, 2 more than the Pac-12. That is almost 3 more than the Big Ten. The style of play is here in this league for a variety of reasons. There are going to be a lot of games that turn into free throw shooting contests. It's not aesthetically pleasing, it's just the way it is. The Alabama game that took 2 hours and 51 minutes to play, I had the box score up a second ago. I mean, just you've got to be able to hit your free throws in an efficient manner or you've got no shot because there's going to be a majority of possessions that end at the free throw line. I mean, it's really quite simple when you look at it that way. Let me pull up this Alabama thing. In the Alabama game, Bama went to the free throw line 40 times.
It's like 58
times.
total fouls called. It was insane.
Oh, that's insane. And A&M goes 28 of 48. Bama wasn't much better. But the point is, A&M shot 48 free throws. Mm-hmm. It's 72 field goal attempts. That is an absurd free throw rate relative to field goals. And when you talk to coaches in this league, Richard, who are into the analytics of it, I was talking to a guy recently, and he said, I've always believed, and most of basketball analytics come from the NBA, right? Like, hypothetically, this is what works in the NBA. There's trickle down there. And it's because of, first of all, it's been tracked better and longer at the NBA level, and they have a larger sample size, right? They play more games, 2.5 times as many games per season. So most of it comes down. And this guy was saying, I've always believed that analytically it's not smart to foul. When you're playing defense, it's not smart. It's the most inefficient thing you can do. He said, but those beliefs were built on NBA statistics. And in the NBA, the officials, generally speaking, don't glance up at the scoreboard or check the stat sheet at halftime and go, oh, man, we're out of whack. We've whistled the Lakers for 10 more fouls than the Spurs. We better even this up. But that does happen on a regular basis in the college game, right, wrong, and different. And so this guy was saying, I'm starting to think maybe that is an efficient way to do it. It, once again, won't be aesthetically pleasing. But if we're fouling, if we're not a great defensive team and we're fouling and they're a bad free throw shooting team, number one, there's an advantage. But number two, because usually these things balance out, that means we're going to the free throw line. And that's the most efficient way for us to play, is to get to the free throw line. So I think it's something you saw it firsthand in the Bama game. That was egregious.
Yes.
The monitor reviews, by the way, side discussion, those have got to stop in the first half, first 10 minutes of a game. But that to me is more of a big picture trend, and A&M is guilty of it by not being more efficient at the free throw line.
Chatting with Tom Hart of ESPN and the SEC Network on the Boss Firearms Hotline. Tom, the Ags are 3-2 in their first 5 SEC games. You've seen them in person and in video prep, stuff like that for games that you're calling. You've also seen a lot of other teams from around the league. So early on, I know A&M's the middle of the road of the SEC standings right now. How does this team stack up to the rest of the league, and where do you think this team's could potentially finish in the standings at the end of the regular season, given what we've seen so far?
Well, it's funny. I was just talking to somebody about this the other day. I was talking to an assistant coach, and I said, man, I'm as guilty as anybody. I see these teams so much that I start to see their warts more than, the positives. And it's probably easier to pick out what teams don't do well. Auburn doesn't have many warts. Alabama has some warts. They don't shoot the ball as well from deep as they have in the past. Missouri has some warts. All these teams ahead of A&M certainly have warts. I think Florida's solid. Tennessee is solid. Mississippi State had a huge win on Saturday night against Ole Miss. There's a lot of teams in front of A&M now. I mean, even the teams that are right there at 3-2, Kentucky, Vandy, State, Tennessee, Florida. Oh, that is a talented group. I think there's 2 goals if you're a 3-2 team right now. Number one is stay above the back of the pack. Those 8 teams are going to have to play on opening day in the SEC tournament. Try to get out of that part of it. So finish in the top half of the league. I don't think it's going to be really hard for the 1-win and 0-win teams, South Carolina, Arkansas, LSU, Texas, even Oklahoma, to kind of dig out of the basement based on, their schedule and the toughness of this league. But for A&M to get to where they need to be, Buzz preaches efficiency. They have to have games where they don't turn the ball over more than 9 times a game, or they're ripping down 20 offensive rebounds. And both of those things are possible. I don't think overnight they're going to become an elite shooting team. That's okay, as long as they do these other things. And what did we see from them in the SEC tournament last year? And when they got hot last year, all of a sudden they rode this wave of hot shooting. And it can be good even for a half to put you in a good position to win. So all that to say, I mean, they're in fine shape. This is just one of those years where it's hard. Comparison is going to be the thief of joy. If you look around the league and start comparing yourself to all these other teams, especially elite teams, and with whatever it is, 6 of the top 8 in the country, you're not going to measure up well. You need to worry about, once we get in the tournament, what are our matchups going to be? Can we win 2 games the first weekend and then catch momentum from there? And I think that's possible not just for A&M, but really for any of the top 10 teams in this league.
Looking around the league on a Saturday that was a lot of really interesting, a lot of fun storylines. You had a really, really fun game at Rupp Arena, Alabama and Kentucky. Tennessee goes down. Auburn keeps it rolling. You saw a top 5 team in Gainesville take down Texas, and then that overtime game in Starkville. What really caught your attention this weekend from around the league?
Well, I know nobody listening today wants me to start with Texas, but I'll start with Texas as an example. What I began to realize, and I've seen the Longhorns a few times this year, is that if you're not a great team, it's going to be really hard to get out of the basement in this league. Texas has some great individual talent. Trey Johnson's going to be a lottery pick in the draft. That's not good enough this year. You have to continue to get better. I was watching the Lakers late last night. Van Dalton Connect is so much better than he was a year ago, even better with his defensive attention to detail. He's not elite, but he had zero interest in playing defense when he showed up at Tennessee, and Rick Barnes made him put the effort forward. You have to continue to improve. You have to continue to develop as individuals and as a team. And then there's some room for growth. But if you're not great, man, it could very well be a long year. We already know about the parity, and I thought that was on display with Vandy knocking off Tennessee. That was a huge win for Vanderbilt, which is now 15-3, and they've got great momentum. And then I think one of the storylines throughout the league in the course of the season is going to continue to be the John Calipari situation at Arkansas. They got blown out by Missouri. They were non-competitive. And that is a roster that not only has a couple of first-rounders on it, but that is a roster that they heavily invested in. I haven't read the article yet, but there might be a comp between Arkansas basketball under Cal and what A&M football was under Jimbo with that number one recruiting class.
I mean, you mentioned...
You kind of see that coming?
I mean, not this early, right? This is year one under John Calipari in Fayetteville. They're 0-5 in the SEC. At least in Jimbo Fisher's first year, it was 8-4. You took Clemson to the wire. You won a bowl game. There were some reasons for optimism. Not much of that for the Hogs right now. You mentioned the loss to Missouri. They lose by 18 on the road. 0-5 to begin the league. What do you think to be the issue with Coach Cal in Arkansas?
Well, defensive effort, number one. I mean, they haven't shown much interest in playing great defense. He was criticized at Kentucky for some of the rotations he had. He started DJ Wagner just about every game when he had Rob Dillingham and Reed Shepherd sitting there as elite scorers that came off the bench. That doesn't bother me that much because, you have guys that are willing to come off the bench and play that role and another guy who probably doesn't want to come off the bench. So that's all part of, roster personnel management. But I think it opens you up to criticism in terms of your rotations and are you playing the best players to win. But my comp to the Jimbo situation wasn't necessarily year one. It is this idea that you could have the number one recruiting class in the country, or you could have a great recruiting class. You could have what we can say now, you can have a high payroll, one of the highest in the country, that doesn't equate to wins if you're not using the guys right, or if you're scouting to get those players is off just a little bit. I mean, it's not just player development, it's being aware of who's out there and what he's going to turn into. Connect is a great example. Tennessee was one of a handful of schools that saw that potential. Several others saw him as a scorer, but slow played it. Tennessee cashed it in, and they had a great year and got the SEC Player of the Year last year.
Tom, you mentioned it a little bit earlier in the segment. You're headed to Oxford on Wednesday night, an 8 p.m. clash between the Fighting Texas Aggies and the upstart Ole Miss Rebels, who just lost their first SEC game in overtime to rival Mississippi State on Saturday night. I know it might be a little bit early on in your prep for that game, but what are a couple of keys you see for Buzz Williams and the Ags to come home with another it'll be a very hard-earned, hard-fought SEC victory if they can pull it off?
Yeah, this could be an old-fashioned rock fight. It really could. I mean, unless there is some high efficiency early, I think this is a game that's in the 60s. I had Ole Miss at Alabama last weekend, 2 Saturdays ago, and they held the top scoring team in the country. Bama was scoring 91 a game, and they had an SEC record number of games where they'd scored 70 in a row. Nobody had put together a streak like that. I forget what that raw number was. They held them to 64, though. I mean, they turned them over, I think, 21 times. They turn you over. They lurk in the passing lanes. They pack it in inside. They do not give up drives to the basket, especially easily. It is going to be a very tough matchup for A&M based on what A&M has been stylistically on offense, right? Mm-hmm. If Ole Miss is facing an elite three-point shooting team, then maybe their defense is not as impactful or as effective. That's not the case with A&M, as we know. So How do you get to the rim? How do you create shots? Can you get the ball reversed against them? One of the guys who's playing really well for them is Malik Dia, who's kind of I guess he's more of a stretch four. He had a couple big threes the other day, but he really does most of his work in the post. And so I think that's going to be a very important matchup for A&M's post guys. I think Pharrell Payne, for example, will probably when he's on the floor, probably draw that assignment. Solomon Washington will probably draw that assignment. He's a great defender. If they can slow down Malik Dia, then that makes Ole Miss a little bit more one-dimensional. And their guards, while they have a lot of experience, they're not terribly efficient. Sean Padula, point guard, came in from Virginia Tech. He's their best backcourt player. And he's I'm going to make this comp, even though I think he's better than the other guy, but he's an Anthony Caruso comp in terms of energy and style of play. Caruso's had an amazing NBA career. But if you think back to the numbers and production at A&M, you had to be an NBA scout, I think, to recognize what that potential was, because based on production, it just really wasn't there. So Padula, from a production standpoint, he's definitely a step ahead of where Caruso was.
Tom, on the way out, college football playoff, the national championship game tonight in your neck of the woods. Ohio State, an 8.5-point favorite over Notre Dame. Who you got, Bucks or Irish? And will you be anywhere near Mercedes-Benz Stadium tonight?
Are we supposed to care about that game in the South now that there's no SEC team?
As college football fans, I think we always care at least a little bit, even if we don't tweet about it. Yeah. Or if we tweet how much we don't care.
I just feel like, Richard, and maybe I'm wrong, and because I was, in the midst of basketball recently, that the chatter about this game is a lot. The volume is a lot lower than it's been historically, which is shocking to me because of the name brands that are playing in this game. I might swing down there. It's incredibly cold here in Atlanta, so that might scare me away. But I think it's a really fun matchup. And very rarely do we talk about Notre Dame as the underdog. They've never been defined as such. But they are against Ohio State, especially relative to talent by position. So what can what can Notre Dame do to try and level the playing field? Their special teams coach, Marty Biaggi, does a tremendous job. I was at the Sugar Bowl. What they did, not just the kickoff return for 98 yards was huge, but also running the punt team on and off, picking up a penalty on Georgia on a 4th and short was it's been emblematic of how they think of special teams. The SEC comp would be Shane Beamer. Like we've used special teams as a weapon. We can weaponize that. We can help neutralize more talented teams. They're going to have a couple of those. They're going to have to get a takeaway. They're going to have a short field because this Ohio State team as a whole is incredibly athletic and incredibly explosive. And then to me, the question will be, is Ryan Day going to be coaching the Bears tomorrow afternoon if they win this thing, or whether or not they win this thing? Like I'm fascinated by a program as big as Ohio State and as popular as it is within their state that they had to circle the wagons and say, after the Michigan game, we're not listening to any of you. You weren't with us then. You're not with us now. And it is generally a toxic way to live life, but I understand why. And I don't think anybody Thanksgiving weekend saw this being possible after they scored 10 points against Michigan.
He's fun, Tom. Mr. Hart, thanks so much for joining me this morning, sir.
Stay zany, my friend. Of
course. You stay warm, and we'll try and stay warm here as well. And we'll tune in on Wednesday night, ESPN2, Ags and Rebels. Tom Hart will be on the call. He's a ESPN and SEC Network broadcaster. He does the broadcasting for ESPN and the SEC Network. Going to have a short segment on the other side. We'll check your text messages. We'll talk a little bit about pizza. You're listening to TexAgs Radio, presented by David Gardner's Jewelers on the Zone.
Everyone, David Nuno here in a moment right now for Snaps Clothing. They are the makers of the only official licensed Texas A&M Pearl Snap shirts. I'm wearing it right now. This is part of their Tailgater collection. It's built for game day. My friend Edgar over there is doing great work. You've got to check out the clothing. It's the Pearl Snaps. It's the cool look. It's kind of hip, but also Western. You'll love it, and they have great stuff there. They'll keep you comfortable as you're repping your Aggie gear, and it's the place to go to get it. Whether you're watching the game from home or tailgating before watching the stands, these shirts have you covered. Head to snapsclothing.com. That is snapsclothing.com to gear up for the season.
Nick Savage, I need to know how deep your Rush knowledge goes.
Rush 2112, dude.
Oh, yeah.
Love that song.
Your big 21, all 20 minutes
all
and 38
20
seconds
minutes.
of it?
Yes.
Well, so my dad, a huge Rush fan, like nut job Rush fan, was traveling, following them around on their final tour, like different stops, stuff like that. Took me to my first Rush concert. I might have been like 8.
Attention all members of the Galactic Federation. We have assumed control.
We have assumed control. Nick, I love that you're a nerd with me, man. This is awesome. You're listening to TexAgs Live, presented by David Gardner's Jewelers. Richard Zane inside the Rollo Insurance Studio. Short segment here as we get ready for Jonathan Hutton of Outkick on the other side. But, Nick, I didn't forget. I have it right in front of me. As a reminder, the final segment of the show is brought to you by Double Dave's. That is the 10:50 a.m. segment. But right now, if you are caller number 12 at 979-693-1150, we'll hook you up with your choice of a dozen pepperoni rolls or one large, one-topping pizza from Double Dave's. Serving Aggieland since 1984, Double Dave's Pizza, serving up your favorite pizza and world-famous pepperoni rolls with reliable in-house delivery, bringing piping hot goodness straight to your door. Just click doubledaves.com and your favorites are on the way. Reminder, they're not open on Mondays, but we are here at TexAgs Live, and so is the Angry Elephant News and Social Center with Reed Neal. He's got a couple updates on Texas A&M athletics for us. Reed?
So A&M men's basketball is not the only team team that pulled away with a win this weekend. We also had wins in A&M's women's tennis versus Prairie View and men's tennis versus UTSA. We swept Prairie View with a 7-0 home opener at the Mitchell Tennis Center on Saturday. We came out swinging, taking an early lead with a 6-0 sweep over Amaya Bobadala, and that was in doubles play with Nicole Kieran and Jeanette Mirals. For men's tennis, we started off with sophomore Tygo Piers, and he took down UTSA freshman Ben Chetui Ungar, who is a redshirt freshman, playing 6-3 in singles.
So big season opening win for Mark Weaver and company. They beat Prairie View 7-0, and then Steve Denton and company on the men's side, 6-1 victory. I know both of them this next weekend are going to be playing in the ITA opening weekend, something like that. The women are going to be hosting at Mitchell Tennis Center, while the men are headed up to Cambridge, Massachusetts. Reed, thanks so much on that update from Texas A&M Tennis. A lot more in Texas A&M athletics coming up when we go around Aggieland with Kay Naegeli at the end of the 9 o'clock hour. But right now, we'll take a break here on TexAgs Live. On the other side, we're chatting with Jonathan Hutton of Outkick. Welcome back. 9:39 on a Monday morning. You're listening to TexAgs Live, presented by David Gardner's Jewelers. Richard Zane inside the Rollo Insurance Studio. And now it's time to hop on out to the Boss Firearms Hotline, where we find Jonathan Hutton, host of Hot Mic with Hutton and Withrow on Outkick. We're talking about some college football ahead of tonight's national championship game. It's Ohio State versus Notre Dame, 6:30 p.m. Central Time kick from Atlanta. And Jonathan, my first question for you is, regardless of the outcome of tonight's game, regardless of what the scoreboard says at the end of the evening, has anybody won more in this playoff, this first edition of the 12-team playoff, than the University of Notre Dame? They're set to pocket a $20 million payout because they are an independent that has reached the national championship game, whereas Ohio State's going to have to split that bill.
Zane, good to be with you, man. Thanks for having me. Look, no, the answer is no. No one's won more. But if Ryan Day wins, he will be the individual who's won more. Even though I think I still get the sense Buckeyes fans are still holding that Michigan loss over him even more than winning a national title, which is crazy to think about. But what Marcus Freeman and the Irish program would have accomplished if they win, first title since '88, and a lot of players coming back from that roster, replacing a quarterback. But hey, I mean, look, an opportunity with a coach that's staying, that's committed, and already has an extension to be a top 5 preseason team whenever we roll things back a year from now.
As we go, I mean, the biggest thing for me is like Notre Dame and the money that they're going to get just from reaching the championship.
Yeah.
Everyone talks about, they can never get a first round bye in this 12-team format as the format stands now, although we know the playoff committee is not opposed to alterations for the 2025 playoff tournament, whatever. Like, is there any incentive to the Irish to join a conference at this point?
No. Look, they're going to make adjustments to the format too. If you're a TV network, if you're the college football playoff, you don't want to go near adjusting the idea that Notre Dame can actually earn the bye, because they're bringing extra viewers to you, and the network, ESPN, they're getting Notre Dame on their network instead of NBC. Like, they want the extra game. Mm-hmm. So I mean that's something I think that's a non-negotiable when it comes to all that. Look, Notre Dame's got I won't say a free pass, but if they lose 2 games in a season, they're probably going to make it to the playoff, given what they mean to the overall numbers. And I mean just the hype around them will be there based on the fan base that they have and the eyeballs that they garner from those that are on the committee. I like the way they've set this up. No, there's not a reason to join a conference. If they did, it would be the Big Ten or the SEC. And they're already playing the ACC schedule, which is far easier. So I would keep it status quo. Marcus Freeman can join a very small group, Dabo Swinney and Kirby Smart of champions for coaching tonight. And he can do it while facing a schedule that is far easier than what Kirby Smart or any coach in the SEC is facing.
One more question about the overarching playoff format before we actually get to tonight's game. It's our first time through this 12-team format as it stands right now. What concerns, questions, changes would you make to this 12-team format?
I think it's the same as most. The automatic buys don't make sense. I get the trying to even out the money and making sure that everyone has a fair opportunity to move forward here with the rankings. When it comes to the home games, though, if you go by where the committee actually ranks teams, there are some teams that would provide far better atmospheres than maybe what we saw, and that deserve to host a game to be on the road. I'll say, they're all. I mean, they nearly set up a situation that, I mean, it was plausible where SMU wins on the road, and we got Boise State SMU in a college football quarterfinal. I don't think that's what the nation wants. I think by and large, you want to see some upsets, but it's a lot like the college basketball tournament. You pull for the Cinderella until you reach about the Elite Eight, and then you want the Blue Bloods. The ratings tell us that. I'm glad. I mean, I'm happy to see Ohio State, Notre Dame in the championship game personally, but where we were in the semis was good. But that's not going to be the case every single year. And I want to see more games on campus. I think we get that when we get to the expansion, Zane. If you go to 16, you can keep the bowls that you have partnerships with for this. All of them can be served with a game, and you can add a second round of games on campus. And I think that really lends itself to benefit the fan, because Texas, for instance, played 2 straight games in Atlanta. Had they made it to the championship, there would have been 3 games of 4 in Atlanta. That's not feasible for fans and travel. So from the SEC championship to the national championship, that's quite a bit of moving to the second city, so to speak, from Austin to Atlanta. Someone's going to face that each year. I don't want to see that. I want to see more games on campus. That's college football.
Jonathan Hutton of Outkick joining us right now. And tonight's game is 2 blue bloods. You talked about that, Ohio State, Notre Dame, 2 fan bases that, I grew up a Michigan fan, not a huge fan of those guys. Either way, whoever comes out, the lesser of 2 evils, still trying to decide that. But it's an Ohio State team that's favored by, at least I saw 8.5 points. I see it on the board behind you. The line's now moved to 8. How do you see this one shaking out? Is it going to be the Bucks rolling over the Irish this evening?
I think it's. I've got Ohio State winning by 11.
Wow.
So I think it's just tacking on a field goal late. Look, I think Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson, they're the deciding factor tonight. They're very good, but I'm always left wanting a bit more from their rushing attack. Can they find chunk yardage on the ground against Notre Dame's defense? And if you pair a few big chain moving runs with Will Howard's mobility, the Ohio State Buckeyes are national champions. And I think Jeremiah Smith comes to life again. He's going to be facing man coverage. He lit up the playoffs to begin this bracket. We saw Texas use their zone coverage to limit him to practically no production last week. And now he's facing a secondary that's in man coverage more than any college football program except for Purdue. So the Irish didn't allow a single completion to Penn State wide receivers. This is a different beast, way different. You're going to have some freshmen against freshmen. Jeremiah Smith's the best, not just freshman, but best receiver, period. He will get his. Can Notre Dame limit those explosive plays from him? If Notre Dame pulls the upset if they stay consistent in 2 areas. They got to force turnovers, and they have to be consistent on their own rushing attack. Can they do that against Ohio State? I'm just betting they won't. I do think it's a close game for the majority of 4 quarters, though.
So if your prediction comes true, Ohio State lifts a trophy tonight. Does the chatter about Ryan Day and his Michigan boogeyman, does that stop? Because it's been over 8,000 days since they've last beaten the Michigan Wolverines. Will the fan base in Columbus finally get over it if it means being champions of the college football world?
I think the majority will either be over it or they will pretend to be. There will be some vocal fans, the ones that didn't show up to round 1 that chose not to go, and allow Tennessee fans to hit the road and grab nearly free tickets, but very affordable tickets. They're the ones that are going to be saying this. Michigan holds the trump card over Ohio State this year, the fan base of the program. They won the title last year. Charlie Baker said they won fair and square, which pissed off everybody. And Ohio State, that's after Ohio State, I know, played a big role in turning them in for rules violations or sportsmanship problems. And then Michigan beat them again, 13-10 this year, and then planted their flag on their field. And then after that, it woke Ohio State up, so to speak, and they're off on this run. But, I mean, it's still the program that owns Ohio State in the back of their mind. Despite the run that they've been on, it's still been about what happened against Michigan with only 10 points. That will stick in the crawl of Ohio State fans, but they should celebrate. Ryan Day, if he wins, take a victory lap. Coaches far too often are paid to fail. I don't want to see him get fired after round 1 and a loss to Tennessee. I hate the buyouts, but now he can be paid for his success. Finally, with that team, to lose a 4th straight to Michigan and then bow out at home to Tennessee, he'd be out.
Yeah, and
now he can prove that he's among the elite coaches. He needs to win with this team, and I think if he does, he wins back the majority of the fans. But as we know in college football, what makes it great, the passion and the hatred for rivals, it runs deep, and I still think it runs deep, regardless of a trophy or not.
We'll see how it shakes out tonight. Jonathan, thanks so much for joining us on this edition of TexAgs Live. Ohio State, Notre Dame, 6:30 Central Time. Thanks so much, Jonathan.
Yeah, Zane, appreciate you, man. And thanks for coming on the show with us whenever you can. Appreciate
Of course, anytime. Jonathan Hutton, appreciate him for taking some time to talk some college football. As we head to break here on TexAgs Live, when we come back, we will go around Aggieland with Kay Naegeli. Welcome back. Last segment of the 9 o'clock hour here on TexAgs Live. Richard Zane inside the Rollo Insurance Studio, and we're wasting no time. We're going to the Holistic Planning Cool Zone, where we find Kay Naegeli for Around Aggieland, presented by Norman G. State Bank. Norman G. State Bank. For rock-solid banking, visit normanggstatebank.com. And Kay, you've kind of got some breaking news that we haven't brought up yet on this edition of TexAgs Live.
We do.
Take it away.
Thank you. So if you have not heard, Texas A&M and Mike Elko just landed a commitment from former Texas tight end Amari Niblack. He will come to Aggieland. That is like the third tight end commit for A&M. He was productive at Texas. We'll have 1 year of eligibility. I believe you have some numbers on him.
6'4", 245 pounds, played 2 years at Alabama, 2023 for the Tide, 13 games, 20 receptions, 327 yards, 4 scores. And then last year for the Longhorns, 4 games, 5 catches, 33 yards, no touchdowns. He had 1 catch for 2 yards against the Aggies on November the 30th.
Interesting. Yeah, another great pickup for the Aggies. Mike Elko and company just continuing to stay very active in the portal and address their needs. Let's move over to the hardwood. On the men's basketball front, A&M took care of LSU on Saturday, posted an 11-point victory at Reed Arena. The win put an end to a 2-game skid for the Maroon White. Wade Taylor, the fourth, returned to play. It's great to see him back in action. They will travel to Ole Miss for an 8 p.m. tip there in Oxford on Wednesday. On the women's basketball front, they were off this past Sunday. They will be back in action on Thursday against Kentucky at Reed Arena. That is a 6 p.m. tip. Also, I know Richard Zane is excited about Diamond Sports around here. We have just 25 days until the Mike Early era gets going in Aggieland. I know we're all excited about that. They will open up with Elon on February the 14th. And then on the softball front, Trisha Ford's third year in Aggieland is just 17 days away. We are right around the corner from some Diamond Sports in Aggieland. That's always a great season. On the women's tennis front, got to talk about the national champs. They secured their first regular season victory, sweeping Prairie View 7-0 at the Mitchell Tennis Center this past Saturday. They will host USF on Friday as their season, their non-conference slate gets going. On the men's front, they also opened up their 2025 season with a victory over UTSA 6-1. They will also host USF on Friday. And then on the track and field front, Alexander Solev set a school record on the opening day at the Corky Classic in Lubbock at Texas Tech in men's pole vault with a height of 5.74 meters. And then on day 2, we also had 2 other Aggies etch their names into the history books. That is Luca Santorum and Kennedy Wade. Santorum won the men's 1,000 meter with a school record time of 2:21. And then Wade logged also a career performance in the women's 600 yards. So great stuff there.
She's Kay Naegeli with Around Aggieland. Didn't know you were so proficient in Russian names. Buzz Williams on the other side when we come back on TexAgs Live. 10 o'clock here on a Monday morning. You're listening to TexAgs Live on the Zone, or maybe you're listening on YouTube. Maybe you're listening on TexAgs.com. However you're accessing the program this morning, we thank you. 10 o'clock on Monday mornings means that Billy Liucci, TexAgs co-owner and executive editor, will be joining us momentarily. But it also means that we've got the Texas A&M men's basketball coach on the Boss Firearms hotline right now. So let's go out to the hotline and chat with Buzz Williams after his Aggies took down LSU, an 11-point victory on Saturday night. Coach, just how good was it to get back into the win column, and how important was it to get 4 back on the floor?
Yeah, sure. Like, we want to play with as many of our guys as possible. Obviously, 4 would be included in that group. We're playing 10 guys, double-figure minutes. And we're reliant on them being their best, and we're thankful for the result from Saturday for sure.
I know we heard Solomon Washington say in the postgame press conference that you kind of got back to who you are on the rebounding front. Just how important was it for your guys to get back to who they are and start rebounding and out-rebound the Tigers to get that victory, and then start building some confidence on the glass moving forward into an important week?
Yes, sir. I think it's very important. It's kind of how we've gotten to this point, to be transparent, in regards to creating more shots for ourselves offensively, and then doing a better job, for sure we did against LSU, of giving them only one shot. We defensive rebounded 80% of their misses, which is tremendous. If for some reason we could do that every game, that would be number 1 in the country. We're number 1 in the country in offensive rebound percentage. We need to continue to find ways to improve our defensive rebound percentage. And I think that was the difference in the game on Saturday, is that we were as good as we have been in an SEC game since we've lived here on the defensive glass.
With the victory, you put it into a short 2-game slide. While that was going on, Coach, how did you see your team react to things not being as positive, at least results-wise? And I know you talk a lot about it being the makeup of who they are. How did that come through and shine and allow them to come out the other side with the victory against LSU?
I thought our guys were absolutely tremendous. I thought the fight, the competitive maturity, I thought the game plan of the staff, that's what this league has become. You're fighting invisible margins, and a lot of those margins are not even statistics. When you play quad 1A games, they're the best in the country, whether they're at home, whether they're on the road. We're going to have several more of those relative to what the numbers are in the net today. And I think that's just what it is. But I thought our togetherness, the cohesiveness, the way we fought versus Alabama and in Lexington was absolutely tremendous. So my grade relative to the 9 guys that played in those games in that regard was an A+.
As you get ready to head to Oxford to face Ole Miss on Wednesday night, where are some of the areas that you're focusing in on that are going to be crucial for you to come back with a victory over the Rebels?
Yeah, I'm just we're in the midst of probably the middle of our study on why they are as good as they are. They suffered their first loss in conference play on the road against their rival on Saturday. Really, really talented team. A lot of versatility within their roster. They're a top 20 team and have continued to improve, to be honest. I know they didn't have the result that they wanted on Saturday, but a lot of the things that they have been good at, they were good at again on Saturday. I think a lot of what we did that we have been focusing on from a rebounding standpoint, playing with a low turnover rate, getting to the free throw line at a high volume, a lot of those things have to continue to translate. And truthfully, we have to continue to find ways to just incrementally improve, because that's what impacts winning and what impacts losing. And so we've got to continue to be prepared for the opponent. And that's a big part of what we do the day before and 2 days before the game. But at the same time, we can't lose the lessons that we're learning from practice and from our games for us to continue to build. I think today starts week 4 of a 10-week SEC season. And so I don't think that we're there. I think we're finding ways to continue to improve. Like all teams, you want to continue to get better, while at the same time, how can you be prepared for the opponent and not take away from your improvement? And that's a delicate walk.
Buzz, I was going to ask you, last year you guys won, what, 2 out of 3 against was it 2 out of 3 against Ole Miss? Or yeah.
Yes, sir. They beat us here by 3, and then we beat them at their place in the last regular season game, and then we ended up playing them
First
4 days
game
later in the conference tournament.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
And probably, I would say probably at the time you guys were playing, starting to, like, Ole Miss ran into a buzzsaw, right? No pun intended. I swear I did not mean that. But and you guys are going up into Oxford. That's going to be, it's an SEC game. Like, it feels like, I've said it before, it feels like going on the road in college baseball. It feels like going on the road, when the SEC is on top in football, which it normally is. Maybe not so much, as tonight. But I was going to ask you, what's the biggest difference in Chris Beard's team over last year? You saw them 3 times, but it sounds like you kind of answered it, and you guys are just really diving into the why of it. So instead, as you might know the answer to this, but I don't know where you are in terms of the elder statesman in this league, but I would be willing to bet it's pretty high up there at this point as far as head coaches go.
Yeah, well, the volatility of coaches in this new era of college athletics is almost similar to the volatility of players.
Yeah, it really. There's a lot of movement for sure.
You can say that, and you can say that in football. It continues to increase. That's one of the things that I've tracked since the portal started, and then obviously 6 months later, NIL started. That's one of the things I've tracked. Is Power 5 changes, not just as players, but also as coaches.
Yeah.
Even as administrators, like if you look at the volatility relative to athletic director jobs, football head coaching jobs, basketball jobs, baseball jobs, I think that's just a byproduct of what the changes have brought. And you would say, in years past, in your time owning TexAgs, 6 years as the head coach at Texas A&M, that's not very long. But then when you start seeing, to your point, it's changing at a much faster rate.
Yeah, it is. It really is. When you look around the league, and even if you look historically, I mean, I've covered a lot of football coaches, and I think the longest tenured one, beside not counting RC, who was here when I started, but is 6. And basketball,
yes,
I think it's BK and you.
Yeah. Yes, sir. I think if you take away the good doctor, because he's an outlier, and if you take away Coach Slocum, to some degree, he's an outlier. And then I think when you look at not just Texas A&M, you can for sure do Texas A&M, and I know the people that listen to this, that's what they're concerned with. But even if you just looked at Power 4 schools and you look at the length of tenure of football and basketball coaches, and then the next part of that is what led to their departure. Like, did they get fired? Like, Coach Slocum is one of my favorite people. He got fired when he was 55 years old, and he's the all-time leading winner at Texas A&M. And then look at what's happened since then. But like you can do that. You can do that with ADs. You can do that with football coaches. You can do that with basketball coaches. Everywhere Coach Beard has been, he has won at the highest level. He's been to the Final Four. He's had some of the most elite jobs that there are to have. He's done it the hard way. He's done it the long way. He has coached at every level. He is an elite level coach on both sides of the ball. I think their ambient, their environment, their arena, new arena, I think it's under-heralded. I think the support that they continue to have has been a part of what's changed their success rate in home games. I think their team is more talented. They have a lot of returning players that played for him last year and entering his second year. The players that he has added analytically are very good. Like a lot of the things that we study, not just the analytics, but also kind of per player, per team. You could look at our numbers per player, per team. They're a top 25 half-court offensive team. They're a top 30 half-court defensive team. And their roster has added other experienced players that are versatile in how they defend, which is how coach defends. They switch every single screen that you set. They try to keep the ball in front. And then offensively, they play a lot of that same variety of we're going to use the versatility. Both of their fives shoot a very high volume of threes. That's unique. I think he likes guys that can all pass, dribble, and shoot. I think he likes guys that can defend any position, any way. And I think they play to that versatility. And I think the 9 guys they're playing all have role definition and understand what coach wants from them. And they're playing at, Saturday was their first loss. They've had some really big wins. They won at Alabama, forced Alabama into 21 turnovers, doubled them up on the offensive glass in Tuscaloosa. A huge win for coach and their team. But he's done that everywhere that he's been, which is why he's been such a successful coach.
Yeah, well, so you have scouted them a little bit. I'm pissed kind of that I missed that Mississippi State Ole Miss game. I did want to see those two. When I think of physical teams in this conference, along with the Aggies, those are a couple of them, way up the ladder there. Where I was also talking about with you having been in this league now for as long as you have, it's just been, to me, Buzz, such a steady progression in terms of, like, what was the conference record your first year when COVID hit it? Was it 10-6 or 9-7?
You're number one. We were 10-8.
10-8.
And we were in Nashville for the conference tournament, and then the world shut down.
Yep.
When we were there, began the shutdown. But we didn't play. We didn't play in the conference tournament in year number one. But in the regular season, we did complete all 18 games. During the actual COVID season is when we didn't play the month of February, and we weren't good at all.
So where I was going with that was you were 10-8, and correct me if I'm wrong, but would have probably had to do some damage in Nashville to get in that year. And nowadays, it's like the league has come so far that I'm not trying to project here and be Jerry Palm or Lenardi or something, but 10-8 for a lot of these teams in this conference. Forget A&M. 10-8 will probably get you a top 4 seed this year for a lot of teams. And how far has the conference come?
Based on how it's playing out, Liucci, I would say that's an easy bet. I think there will be multiple teams with a losing record who get an at-large NCAA tournament bid.
Yeah,
I think, and I know it's probably in the archives if that y'all do that. I remember talking to you on one of these early in the season, and I mentioned what was transpiring with football in regards to the uproar on why this team didn't go to the college football playoff, why this team didn't. I think there's a lot of positives in SEC basketball analytically.
Yeah.
The best college basketball non-conference analytic number in the history of college basketball. That's evidence. There's data to support that. That's not just a coach talking about how hard it is to win a league game. But I think, like everybody knows, in conference, no matter what the name of your conference is, whether it's good or bad, half the teams win and half the teams lose. So it's a sum zero deal. And so now what happens is like Corey was asking me on Saturday night, she was like, that's good, right? And I go, yeah, I think it's good that we won, but analytically, it's going to end up being a push.
Right.
And she's like, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, it's going to be a push because relative to Ken Palm, relative to the net, we did what we were supposed to. That's a positive because you can also not do what you're supposed to. But now what happens is when you're in the rarefied air that this league has become, the only change is if you did what you were, quote, supposed to do, is did the teams above you, did they do what they were supposed to do? Then they're going to stay. Did the teams below you, did they do better? Did they have a chance to move above you? And so it just becomes the algorithm for how all of that is calculated. But I do think, similar to what you said, 10 and 8, you're going to get a bye. And you may, depending upon tiebreakers, you may get a double bye.
Yeah.
But if you have a losing record, you still are going to have a chance for an at-large because I think there will be multiple teams. You can't be 4-14, but then I think it will come down to, now, what did you do in non-conference? And it's like similar to what I was saying before you got on. We've already played multiple quad 1A games.
Mm-hmm.
Well, everybody knows what a quad 2 game is. Everybody knows what a quad 1 game is. Yeah, but now it's become so specific. We're playing multiple quad 1A games. Like, we have the fourth most wins in quad 1 and quad 2 in the country.
Yeah.
Well, a portion of that is we have a good team. We're doing positive things. But also a portion of that is, if you look a week from now, we're going to have 0 quad 3 games that we've even played in. Wake Forest is the only quad 3 game we've played as of right now, and they're one spot away from being quad 2. Well, this week, Forbes has only lost one league game. This week, that win against Wake will turn into a quad 2 game. And so now all of a sudden, that will be another quad 2 win. And today we're fourth in the country in those accumulation of quad 1 and quad 2 wins. Now we're about to add another quad 2 win, but we've already played the game. And so that's where the algorithm of all of this, and you never know how it's going to turn out. And there is some degree of, you have to do your job. Otherwise, none of this matters. Mm-hmm. And everybody's going, hey, Buzz, why'd you lose 2 games last week? And like, I'm going to say all the right things publicly because we do want to win. But like, you know who we're playing, right? Like, this is a top 10 matchup for the first time since they built Reed Arena. And the people that are asking the questions, some of those people weren't even born when Reed Arena was built. Like, it's just that's the historical context of what this league has become.
Coach, appreciate you taking the time to join us this morning.
Yes, sir. Have a good day.
Buzz, we could do that all day. I would love to talk about the league and the whys and how it's gotten to where it is, and maybe we'll do that next week.
Yes, sir.
All right, buddy.
Have a good day, Luke.
All right, see you.
Thank you, Coach. Texas A&M takes on Ole Miss Wednesday night, 8 p.m.
It's a big one, man. That is a
fun Tom on the call.
They're all nice. Yep. They're all big, right? They're all big in this league. And this week is one of those where I don't know. I feel like they're all this way. Like if you'd have had Wade against Bama and Kentucky, how much more competitive? And I was at that Kentucky game, and very competitive. Through most of it. Obviously, we saw the Bama game where you're just kicking yourself if they make some free throws. What does that one look like? Again, these are without one of the best players in the SEC. It's like Imagine Bama without Sears. Imagine Kentucky in that game without Jackson Robinson. And how do those things look? So there was nothing discouraging about it, but it is just like you can't have any weakness in this conference anymore. And so if you have a guy hurt, whether you're A&M or you're Auburn, and you know, Auburn, who'd they beat this weekend? It was a big win.
They outlasted somebody by like
one or 2 points. Yeah. Georgia.
Yeah.
The tough Georgia team,
UGA.
by the way, that A&M will play this year. But
just goes to show how tough road wins are.
Well, look at
in this
Vandy
league.
in Tennessee.
Yep.
Look at, well, it's the opposite. Like Missouri, who no one, like we're not talking about Missouri right now. We're talking about Bama and Kentucky, and there's Auburn, and the Aggies got to go play Ole Miss in Texas this week, and we know Texas is going to want. Missouri went into the swamp and beat Missouri went into Gainesville and beat Florida. Vandy beat Tennessee at home. It's just the league is going to be like this.
I mean,
this
if you
year.
think you've got a chance to come up for air, you're about to face an Ole Miss team that beat Alabama.
Well,
So
and I have
it's
people,
crazy.
and Ole Miss beat Bama, and I have people that are like, that friends of mine or that are saying like, well, okay, you're not going to beat, let's look at the schedule and try to get to 9 wins and try to get to 10 or 11, you know, and they're looking at it, or man, this could happen, it'll be 8 and 10. And what they're doing a lot of is when they do that is they're saying, okay, you're going to lose to Auburn. You're going to lose to Tennessee. Ole Miss is really good. You're going to lose in Oxford. And they're doing stuff like that. And number one, nobody's sitting there going, you're going to lose, you know, somebody, well, you're not going to go win at the Hump in Starkville. They're really good right now. But no one's looking at Missouri going, you're going to go lose up there. So there's so much fallacy in that because they're saying, yeah, you're going to go win on the road at Missouri because you're better. And it's like, what? Like, you mean the same Missouri team that just beat?
Yeah.
And the same Missouri team that beat Kansas earlier, that Missouri? And then you're also wrong in assuming that A&M can't beat anyone on the schedule. And that can be said about a lot of teams, but the Aggies, to assume they can't go and steal some of these games away from Reed Arena and much less win a couple of big ones at Reed, you haven't watched this team this year, particularly with Wade, but I would contend even without him.
Yep.
Oklahoma, Alabama, Kentucky, those 3 games. But on the flip, you also haven't watched Aggie basketball the last 3 seasons in terms of what they can do to reach up and pull someone down in their style play, that type of game, and beat them. Rick Barnes knows that. John Calipari knows that. Bruce Pearl knows that. You can go on and on.
More
Chris
hoops
Beard
talk.
knows it.
Yep, more hoops talk with Billy Liucci as we go on 10 o'clock hour on TexAgs Live. Also got a commitment we need to talk about on the other side of this break, Billy. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to TexAgs Live, presented by David Gardner's Jewelers. Sorry, we're back, Billy. 10:29 here on a Monday morning.
Zane.
TexAgs Live, presented by David Gardner's Jewelers. Billy Liucci, Richard Zane inside the Rollo Insurance Studio. And where do you want to go with this?
First of all, I want to say, speaking of Rollo and sponsors, I'm really well rested, and it was very hard to get out of bed today. It's been difficult because my good friend over at the Sleep Station, Jerry McLeod, and I, which is funny because you and Katie and Allie, one day after lunch when we left Napa Flats next door, went over there and y'all all helped me pick out a mattress at the Sleep Station. And this Tempur-Pedic just gets better by the night. I've always been afraid of them because I just don't know. I've been skeptical. So I literally was talking. I was like buying a new car.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, what do I do here? What do I do? And they convinced me that was the way to go for me. And man, I'm telling you,
so you've been
as each day goes by, I keep getting up feeling better and better.
Good.
And it's only been like a week so that I've been sleeping in it. And one night away in Lexington, we had a couple nights away in Dallas. So it's now I'm like, unfortunately though, Zane, there's not going to be.
Sleep well Saturday night?
Unfortunately, there is not going to be. I was weeping into the Tempur-Pedic because there's not going to be a couple nights away from the bed in Detroit this weekend.
You and I talked on the phone Saturday night. Legitimately might be one of the most heartbreaking, difficult to stomach losses
my fault.
In sports history.
It's my fault. It's not Jaden Daniels. It's not Cliff. It's not Jared Goff. It's not defensive injuries.
So after weeks of saying I was going to be the one undoing the season, you're taking the blame?
Last year, when they were up 24-7, maybe 24-10 at that time, I don't know.
It was 24-7 at halftime of the NFC Championship game last
maybe
year.
when it was 24-10 or 14. But I was convinced to book Vegas because I was told by the end of the night when it's going to be the Chiefs or Ravens and the Lions that there's going to be no rooms. So I booked a room, and then the implosion started. This year, at brunch on Saturday, I was with a friend that is connected up there and was able to get me a hotel in that suite that we stayed in. Nice, big, every time I've been up there, I've stayed in it. Seth and I did it, you and I did it. 2-bedroom, giant living room, nice view. Got that at some kind of amazing rate that I didn't know existed when we did it. And I booked it.
For this weekend.
Prior to the Lions game. So, lesson learned. I hope it's not a realization too late. But we're not going anywhere.
No.
Lions aren't going anywhere. I know they're going to lose probably both coordinators. I think that's going to be okay. I think Dan Campbell now versus then. He had connections in the NFL then with all his years in the league. But I think now and when other coordinators see what he's let those two guys and Johnson and Glenn do, I think there's a whole nother world for him opened up in terms of the coordinator front than there was when he was taking his first head coaching job too. And look how he landed on those two hires. So
did a great job.
The players, look at their skill position players on offense. Look at their offensive line. I don't think Goff is a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. I think he's certain, without question, a top 10. And they got to get healthy on defense, and probably, they've done such a good job of drafting and adding pieces that you expect them to do that as well. So I don't think that's going to be a popular thing. Is going to say, oh, windows, this was their window. Completely disagree. I will say though, what's probably eating Dan up more than anything right now is there really was an opportunity last year and this year to win a Super Bowl.
Yep.
Or at the bare minimum, get there. And
I still think they're way better than both of the teams that are playing on Saturday out of the NFC. And granted, they just lost by 14 to Washington, but I mean, body of work, Detroit's way better than Washington. And I'd like to see a rookie quarterback multiple. If I had to do it over again, I'd like that matchup again. We talked last week. That's the matchup we wanted.
No, I was worried about Jaden Daniels. I did not want Jaden, and they felt like a hot team. That's why I didn't want to see the Rams or the Bucks last year, but they managed to weather those storms. Those were hot teams coming in last year. The Rams were peaking when they got there, and obviously Tampa kind of scrambled to get into the playoffs, and then they beat the crap out of the Eagles, and they were coming in. So you don't want the hot team that got in there and all of a sudden is like, wow, they're playing by far their best football of the season. That's exactly what, like this year, that was not Tampa. It was actually probably the Rams or the Redskins, the Commanders. So, yeah, that was the team you did not want to see. You still should have beat them. And it just, turnovers and couldn't get off the field. I mean, there's no thing in football that will kill you more than not getting off the field on third down. And
turn the ball over 5 times. What are your... they won a game earlier this year when they threw 5 picks.
I was at that one.
Such an anomaly and such an outlier.
I was at that one, and Goff looked a lot the same. From his very first throw, where he was so behind Patrick going across the middle, from his very first throw, he just didn't look like himself. And I don't know, is that a week off that, everybody talked about they needed it so bad, but that shouldn't affect a veteran quarterback like that. It just wasn't his day. It wasn't their day. And it felt like it was their season. I said the other day, I felt like it was the Lions' season and it's Josh Allen's season. And that was the collision course I thought we'd see. And so it'll be interesting now. It might be Saquon Barkley's season. That dude, like what he did yesterday again.
Those 2 home runs, house calls, crazy.
I mean, he's
so good.
And the thing about Saquon is on those 2 touchdowns, like especially that second one, you could see it was going to be a touchdown before he got to the line of scrimmage. Mm-hmm. Like as he let you go, uh-oh. And they've got it going so well in the running game right now. I don't love Jalen Hurts. I never have since Alabama, but you got to give them and him credit for the fit there. I think Matt Stafford got robbed of another Hall of Fame resume moment there, because he was going to beat them and take the Rams from out of nowhere mid-season to potentially another Super Bowl, right? Like I think at home they would have beaten Washington. Like, just he was going to come from. They weren't that team. He wasn't that player in the MVP race, and he was going to go into Philly in the snow with an LA team that's known more for finesse and their McVay, and they were going to beat the Eagles. I'm fully convinced of that until that guy false start. What was it? A false start and then a sack, where there's nothing you could do about it. And then it was over. I thought they were going to pull that one off. But getting back to the Lions, apparently it's been called to my attention that some of our friends in Austin think it's cute. And there's a couple things that they think. They think the transcripts that everyone's it's kind of like, we're just summarizing. They think that's the writing. And it's like, man, this is just not good writing. And it's like, no, they're transcribing an hour, 2 hour, 3 hours worth of conversation. That's number one, the first thing they're wrong on. The second one was they think apparently that there's some humor in me saying, oh yeah, I'm going to try to set it up where Elko and Dan get together. I don't understand how that's. Sometimes I feel like people just. Sometimes I think people just like anything that. Like, what's wrong with that? Like, what's funny about it? What's wrong with it? Does it bother you that I can do that? Like, I don't even think it's like a cool thing, but you say it and the way people react. Like, people, I've decided, man, 99% of people are normal and cool, and that 1% are the loudest group of absolute losers on planet Earth, and they are the people that time and time again I say this. Nobody likes you. If you act like that in real life, nobody likes you. And that's why you're acting like that. Or you're just going with a persona and a bit online it's a chance to reinvent yourself, I guess. Because, like I say, most of these people I meet are really cool, nice people. It's crazy.
Billy Liucci.
Are we going to a break?
Yeah, we do. We got to go to a break. On the other side, you want to talk about Maury Nyblack, committed to Texas
We're going
A&M
to talk about a
earlier
lot
this
because
morning.
I'm going to drag you way past 11, my friend.
Goodness.
By the way, I drove down here, speaking of idiots and losers, I drove down here today, down Wellborn from eating breakfast, and I guess I double-clicked or hit the wrong button on my alarm because I didn't want to pull it out of the pocket because it's so cold. I look in the rear view, and it's a little bright as I'm cruising down Wellborn. I'm like, what happened to my window tint? And then I'm like, oh. I'm cruising down Wellborn with the whole thing up of the.
I'd like to say I'm surprised, but I'm not.
The whole back door is open. And
I'm just more surprised. What did you put in the back?
Well, there was a lot of stuff in the back, so I don't know what's been You might be able to get some decent shoes if you're driving down Wellborn right now, or a jacket, some kind of shacket, I'm sure is in there. Well, it wasn't all gone.
Go look for Billy Liucci's stuff in the road on Wellborn Road while we go to this break. Talking to Maury Nyblack when we come back on TexAgs Live, presented by David Gardner's Jewelers.
He's so funny.
Welcome back. 10:46 on a Monday morning. Billy Liucci, Richard Zane inside the Rollo Insurance Studio. This is TexAgs Live, presented by David Gardner's Jewelers and Luch. Earlier this morning, Mike Elko and company got another transfer portal commitment. What are you laughing at?
You follow this? I'm just on Twitter during the commercial. You familiar with this? With the senator from is it Pennsylvania, right? Fetterman.
Okay.
You familiar with him at all in his bit? It's just wild, dude. He shows up at the inauguration and he's wearing like exactly what Bronny would wear in here. He's wearing it like a black, might even be Champion, I can't tell, hoodie. Like just like this material, just a black hoodie and gray, I want to say gym shorts, but I'd be offended if somebody wore as ill-fitting a short like that into a gym. They look like things that like you put on like before you go to sleep and you're wandering around the house the next morning in your coffee and you're on the back porch letting the dog like. And he wore that as a senator to the inauguration. At some point, you have to just tip your cap to the amount of I don't give a. It's wild.
Well,
that is wild. He's the Bronninger of senators.
We're going to go ahead and take another break here on TexAgs Live. Well, Fashion Talk with Billy Liucci will be back on the other side. I promise you we'll talk about Amari Niblack. Probably a lot extra this morning for our YouTube listeners and our listeners on TexAgs.com.
Well, you're trying to raise your voice to keep me from interrupting. Were we going to do the Niblack conversation in 20 seconds like that? Or
well, no, I just know that I've got to get another break in so we can go long on the other side.
Luck.
Yep. Thank you. We'll be back on TexAgs Live.
giving
We're back.
South Texas. You're giving Chris Phillips.
Thank you. I like Chris Phillips.
You look like him.
We have the same haircut.
Y'all have the same haircut and same beard. Like right now, you're shorter than normal.
Speaking of haircuts and beards, as we welcome you into the last segment of TexAgs Live, maybe the last segment of TexAgs Live Richard Zane's ever allowed to host.
Why?
Richard Zane, Billy Liucci.
Doing a hell of a job.
Haircuts, beards. Bronninger talking crap about my hair to my barber this weekend as if he has a hair on his head to talk about. How outlandish is that? Sorry to cut you off. Super outlandish. But on the Bronninger list of outlandish things, not even
They didn't
on the
register. When you told me that, I'm like, okay, well.
That's crazy. He told my barber that I looked terrible.
The words, the audacity, don't register with him.
Tune in at R_Bronninger for more photos of St. Thomas later today.
Again, the audacity. Because he'll be the same guy that will make fun of you, me, Nuno, Allie and Katie, anybody for posting on any trip they ever go on and just completely oblivious to what he does. And it won't even register.
It just makes me shake my head.
Well,
like everything he does makes me shake my head.
No, at least it doesn't make you shave your head, because then you would be him.
I would never. Put me down at that.
Where are we at? Are we going to a break, or we got?
No, this is the last segment. We're okay. You've already told me we're going long, so we're going to do that. But now I'd like to. Yeah, we do. Hayden Schott coming up an NIL interview at 11:15. But now I want to get into the topic I've been trying to bring up for 3 segments.
Yeah.
Amari Nyblack, tight end from Texas and Alabama, commits to Mike Elko, Colin Klein, and the Fighting Tex Aggies earlier this morning. Your thoughts, Mr. Billy Liucci?
Well, what they're going to try to do is make you feel, and I've already seen like some A&M people trying to talk about the commitment, and they're walking on eggshells on social media because they're scared of getting like ratioed or called out for overhyping a guy that didn't play a lot at Texas. It's not about that. I look at what he did at Alabama as a freshman, and I look at what A&M needs at the tight end position, and I think it's a pretty damn exciting addition.
You mentioned that 2023 season at Bama, 13 games, 20 catches, 327 yards, 4 scores.
As a freshman. And they lost a guy that had similar but less production as a freshman in Donovan Green, who went to LSU. And again, like LSU fans can and should be excited about adding Donovan Green. Donovan Green did not play very much at A&M this year. Now, it was injury related, but he was not considered as where he was in his comeback good enough, well enough, capable enough to crack into that rotation. He might go to LSU and recapture that freshman form and be really good. Same thing can be said for Amari. The season he had at Bama, on a Bama team that went to the Final Four, and as you know, as a Michigan fan, was a play away from playing for the national title. And this was a guy that was a weapon in their passing game. Was he a lethal weapon? Was he an unstoppable force? No, but he was a freshman. And had everything been the same at Bama and he'd come back, it's not unreasonable to think he would have been a 400 to 500 yard receiver in that offense. And I say receiver because that's his strength. And I think part of that is what kept him. And there are sane Texas people I can talk to and have talked to that would tell you that probably the blocking or lack thereof is what held him back. If you see him, he's a thinner, skinnier tight end. He's a weapon in the passing game. And you look at what the Aggies have added in Riley and Berkature, and you look at Theo at 270, who can make plays in the passing game. He's got it on tape. You look at a couple of those touchdown catches early in the year. You look at the New Mexico State game, what he did. But there's not a lot at the tight end position in terms of being a vertical threat in the passing game. He is certainly a almost like an overgrown wide receiver. And look, they need a pass catching threat at tight end to add to the mix, and they need more help at receiver. I'm not calling him a receiver because he's not, but just another pass catching weapon as you continue to try to upgrade that receiving core. You added Concepcion, you added, Craver, you added Micah Hudson, TBD. You're trying to upgrade that receiving core. You hope Terry Bussey makes a giant leap into year 2. Ashton Bethel Roman, Isaiah Williams are young guys that stayed on campus that they're excited about. But then you take a guy like Nyblack and, again, go back 2 years. By the way, people that are being really honest in Austin, they look at their depth at tight end, and they've got a guy in Washington that they think could be a big impact guy this year. But there was a roadblock by the name of Gunnar Helm who was pretty damn good. And he was one of the best pass-catching tight ends in the country and could block. So that's what he was behind there. I think that's a Holman-Wiggins thing, is that connection. And he knew him as a recruit. He knew him at Alabama. And he knows exactly what he'll bring to this football team, to that position room, and to that pass-catching core. Nobody knows that. Not you, not me, not Howell or Brawny, not anyone on Aggie Twitter, no one on Longhorn Twitter. Nobody knows what that guy specifically can bring to this offense and what they want to do more so than Wiggins. And again, we've seen it time and time again. That guarantees you nothing. But clearly they thought that he's somebody that can upgrade the position room and the offense. And I think you'll see him used, obviously they're getting blocking tight ends. And not to say that you're just going to give him a free pass, but his strength is certainly as a pass catcher, and I think they'll utilize him accordingly.
It's now 14 commitments for Elko and Company in this transfer portal window, including Micah Hudson, who you've addressed. Are we watching anything else in the transfer portal? Is this cycle is continuing, or
in this early window? I don't believe so, but I will tell you this: I hear rumblings of a player or two that will be playing tonight that could enter the portal. I think A&M would be in play, but I also don't think it's a situation like with Nyblack where I'd go, okay, I think if he goes, I think the Aggies get him as soon as you heard he was in the portal. This wouldn't be the case if either of these guys go in. And I'll say this, there's a couple guys at Ohio State I'm watching, and there's one player at Notre Dame I'm watching. Again, not to come to A&M, but guys that are at positions where I think A&M would be interested in them. So, I mean, who else is going to be recruiting them? They're top tier type guys. So, unless the Aggies get somebody that's playing tonight, I think they're done in the early window. Put it that way. Unless they get somebody playing tonight. The receiver from Penn State, Harrison, went to
Ole Miss.
Lane Kiffin probably threw a party on social media about it, and
between DMing ring girls.
He's DMing ring girls now.
That's the joke. Is that one of the ring girls from the Tyson Paul fight said that an SEC coach slid in
Oh yeah.
You're caught up on
and then
that.
Nick Saban was golf with her the next day. I forgot she's a ring girl. I forgot what made her famous. So ring girl, fine, whatever. I'm just going to leave that there.
Okay.
I'm not, you guys, everybody knows I'm not a fan of Kiffin for a million reasons. So the way he acts when he gets a commitment or the things he says while going 9-3 with the most talented roster in their history, all that aside, those are just added reasons to think less of him.
You mentioned tonight's game. We've got an entire hour with you. You haven't even brought up Ohio State versus Notre Dame. 6:30 tonight on ESPN. Mm-hmm. National champion will be crowned. I think I've decided that the lesser of two evils from my rooting background is going to be the Fighting Irish. What say you?
I think that I've watched Notre Dame Eke by A&M, and there'll be idiots that say, it was a 10-point game. Eke by A&M. That game was tied, and
late scores.
What was it? 2 minutes left. They scored the touchdown to. I mean, they were controlling. They were a 3rd and 5 away from the Aggies getting the ball back to win that game.
Yep.
And Riley Leonard got 6 yards.
Yep.
Or whatever. I think he threw a slant pass there that was caught for like a 6-7 yard gain. That's what that dude and this team has done all year when they've needed, except against Northern Illinois a week later, where it looked like the worst loss A&M. You know, you lose to a top 10 team in a close game. Okay, the next week they lose to NIU. The whole world says both teams suck. One of them's playing for a national title. And yes, they had an easier path. But then they got to the playoffs. They beat the crap out of a good Indiana team. They lost their second, probably, once they lost the corner early in the year that's going to be a first-round pick. Then they lost the defensive lineman, the defensive tackle. That was probably one of their 2 best players on defense at the time. They're down now. They're not like the Lions where they're down 18 freaking players, but they're down like their 2 best or 2 of their 3 best. And all they do is beat the crap out of Indiana. They choke out Georgia, and they beat Georgia at their own game. And then they win a really good football game against Penn State. They're tough, they're physical, they're opportunistic. They create turnovers, and they just hang in there and don't give up. Whether it's the A&M game at Kyle Field, whether it's after losing to NIU and then having won every game since, or whether it's what happened against Georgia or Penn State. I think Ohio State is the best team in the country right now. I think all year they were one of the 3 or 4, like a fully healthy Georgia, Ohio State, Oregon, and Texas. Well, guess what? They beat the ever-living crap out of Oregon, and they beat Texas, and they beat Penn State earlier in the year, and they beat Indiana, a playoff team earlier in the year. All they lost to was Michigan, your Wolverines, right? They lost to Oregon,
they lost the game
but they
early to
avenged.
Oregon.
They
It was like a
avenged
1
that
point loss, too.
on the road at night, and they avenged, and they could have won it at the end there. That was a crazy ending, and they avenged it, and showed they were the better
in
team.
Pasadena,
They're the best team in the country,
averaging 37 points in the playoff.
Yeah, and look, I watched them struggle against Texas. If it wouldn't have been for a melee going on the TexAgs boards at the time, forget Twitter. One day we'll find that buffoon, but there's forget that. I'm sitting there I didn't get to fully enjoy and appreciate the Jack Sawyer play. I look up and he's racing down the field. I was upstairs at that point in the box, but that was an interesting game because part of me wants to go see. I don't think Texas played great in that football game.
They're on the 1 yard line, chance to tie it.
And their defense gave Ohio State's offense fits.
Yep.
And I said at the beginning of the year, this is going to be the best defense that Texas plays. I mean, A&M plays, besides maybe Texas. Notre Dame's defense is on par with Texas's defense, and they gave Ohio State fits. There was the one play before halftime, or Ohio State would have been sitting at 7 at the break, and they hit him with that screen pass, and it went. And then they really struggled in the second half. And I think they scored 1 touchdown, and then they had a defensive touch. It was a struggle for their offense, and it was clearly a struggle for their offense a few weeks earlier against Michigan. I think that the Notre Dame defense can keep this thing close. And I know Ohio State has the weapons in Smith and Henderson and the rest of that receiving core. I think they've got a good tight end. But I think if you pressure Will Howard, and I think you can pressure him into mistakes and turnovers. And the Longhorns should have had probably a couple of more interceptions. I think they had 1. Did they have 1 off a tipped ball that was picked? Or I think they should have had 2 more. Like Will Howard was uncomfortable and unsettled. He's a winner. I give him credit. All that being said, I'm going to go with the safe pick of Ohio State. But I think it's going to be a close game, and I think it's going to look nothing like when the last time Notre Dame played for it, where Manti Te'o and company shouldn't have even been on the same field as Alabama. I think talent-wise, people underrate Notre Dame. They've got a couple of badass running backs. They've got a quarterback that, like I said, man, the dude, if he needs 5, he gets 6. If he needs 1, he gets 2. He's just survived, and here they are. And they did not look like that type of team earlier in the season. But if you just go back and say, okay, what have they done? They beat Indiana, but they beat them handily. And to beat Penn State and Georgia in back-to-back games, physical, hit you in the mouth football games, that's what Ohio State's going to be. That's the way they win, and that's what Michigan did to beat them, and that's what Texas almost did to beat them. So I think it's a close game. I think Ohio State wins 27-23, 24-20, something like that.
Well, Luch, thanks. Appreciate
Luck of the Irish, though. Marcus Freeman.
God, I would love that.
I actually, okay, now who would I want to win? I would like to see Notre Dame win for a couple reasons. I think Freeman's an easy guy to root for. Getting bumped up when Brian Kelly left for LSU. I don't want to hear about the Big Ten, although that doesn't bother me so much, but I don't want to hear about the Big Ten. I used to care way more about the conference strength and stuff before it was a 12-team playoff. SEC is going to be fine. I wanted the SEC at the peak when a couple of our primary recruiting rivals and crap-talking rivals were in a lesser league. So that mattered. I know it matters on the recruiting trail. That was an edge A&M had for a long time and, yes, could not take advantage of. They butchered that opportunity, a 12-year head start. But now I don't really care because the SEC is going to get at least 3 every year and sometimes 4. Part of me doesn't want to hear about the Big Ten, but here's the thing. If we're going to play Notre Dame next year, one of 2 teams in September is going to play the defending national champs. And it's either going to be a team down the road over here in burnt orange, or it's going to be a team right here across the street in maroon and white. If we're going to play Notre Dame early in the season, I'd love them to be the defending national champs and riding whatever it is winning streak into the offseason, win their first game or 2 next season, the lightweights, and have Texas A&M go in there in front of touchdown Jesus and break the streak and defeat the defending champs. That's what I'd like to see. Trying to think of how many times I've seen Texas A&M beat the defending national champs. Do you want to render a guess here, Richard?
3.
Maybe. I don't know. But I know I watched them beat Bama after they won it.
Uh-huh.
Okay, you're right. They beat LSU after they won it in 2020, right?
Yes.
Here at Kyle Field. They beat, so I watched them beat Bama in 21 after Bama won it in 20. No. Yeah. Bama won it in 20. So 2 years in a row, the Aggies beat the defending national champions. I don't know if I've ever said that. I don't know if they did. Right? You don't have to look it up that much.
I'm just trying to remember when
Bama won it during the COVID season.
I know Oklahoma was ranked 1 when A&M and RC knocked them off, but did they win the national championship the year before?
No, they won it 2 years before. Okay. So there's one more, and now you've thrown me off.
Oh, my bad.
It's okay. It's certainly not mine for getting thrown off. Why would that have anything to do with me for not being able to?
It's been a floundering 3.5 hours, so why stop now?
This self-deprecating Seinfeld bit you're trying to do doesn't fly. You've had a good show. I'm not going to hear it. So there's a third one, guys. Okay. Nebraska, 1998. They won it in 97. Reed's parents I was probably at the game with Kristen and TJ.
Wow.
That's probably true. So, anywho, 98, Aggies over Nebraska. 2020, Aggies over LSU. 2021, Aggies over Bama. So why not 2025, Aggies over Notre Dame?
Speaking into existence, Billy.
There you go.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this edition of TexAgs Live. We'll catch you tomorrow.